Let's be real for a moment, space is huge. I mean, almost incomprehensibly vast. When we stare up at the night sky, we're seeing just a tiny fraction of what's actually out there. Billions of stars, countless galaxies, and endless stretches of pure, unbroken darkness. It's that very scale, that profound mystery, which has always sparked something deep inside of us. A sense of wonder, sure, but also a lingering curiosity. Because when you're faced with something so immense and so fundamentally unexplored, it's only human to start asking big questions, and sometimes to fill in the blanks with ideas that are as fascinating as they are unbelievable. This is the world of space conspiracy theories, a place where official explanations are questioned, hidden agendas are suspected, and the line between science and science fiction gets wonderfully blurry. For generations, these stories have captivated the public imagination, suggesting there might be more going on beyond our atmosphere than we're being told. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We've gathered the most compelling, the most debated, and the most downright mind-bending space conspiracy theories ever to capture our collective attention. From whispers of secret lunar bases to rumors of extraterrestrial encounters covered up by governments, these are the ideas that refuse to fade away. They tap into our deepest hopes, our biggest fears, and that timeless human urge to wonder what if. So as we journey through this list, we'll explore not just the claims themselves, but the reasons they persist. We'll look at the evidence put forward by believers, the counterarguments from skeptics, and the cultural moments that turn these theories into lasting legends. It's a ride through decades of speculation, a tour of the stories that make us look at the stars a little differently. Whether you're a firm skeptic or someone who loves a good mystery, there's something undeniably thrilling about peering into the unknown and considering the possibilities. So get comfortable, keep an open mind, and let's begin our countdown of the top 25 space conspiracy theories that continue to intrigue, baffle, and inspire us to this very day. Now, our journey into the cosmos of conspiracy begins with perhaps the most famous and enduring question ever asked about our adventures in space. Did we really go to the moon? At number 25, we have the theory that the Apollo moon landings were an elaborate hoax, staged here on Earth. This idea didn't just appear overnight. It gained serious traction in the 1970s, fueled by a growing sense of public distrust and the sheer, breathtaking nature of the achievement itself. To some, it seemed almost too perfect, too monumental to be true. The core argument from believers is that the United States government, locked in a tense Cold War space race with the Soviet Union, was so desperate to claim a symbolic victory that it faked the entire endeavor. They point to a collection of photographic and video anomalies as their key evidence. One of the most cited examples is the American flag planted by the astronauts. In the footage, it appears to wave and ripple. Skeptics ask, how can a flag wave in the vacuum of the moon, where there is no air to create a breeze? Another common point involves the lunar photographs. The sky in every single picture is pitch black, completely absent of stars. If you were standing on the moon, away from the light pollution of Earth, wouldn't the sky be absolutely brilliant with countless stars? Then there are the shadows cast by the lunar lander and the astronauts. Some appear to converge at multiple angles, which conspiracy theorists argue indicates the use of multiple studio light sources, like those found on a film set, rather than a single, powerful source, the sun. These questions, on the surface, can seem perplexing. They tap into a very human instinct to scrutinize the unbelievable. and the scientific and historical rebuttals to these claims are just as fascinating. Let's take that waving flag. The flag wasn't waving from wind, it was swinging from momentum. The astronauts had to twist the pole back and forth to force it into the tough lunar soil. And this action caused the flexible horizontal rod at the top to vibrate, making the flag appear to ripple. Once they let go, the flag remained motionless. As for the missing stars, the explanation lies in camera settings. The lunar surface is incredibly bright, bathed in direct, unfiltered sunlight. To capture the details of the astronauts and the landscape without completely overexposing the film, NASA used fast shutter speeds and small apertures. These settings let in very little light, which was perfect for the bright foreground, but not nearly sensitive enough to pick up the relatively faint starlight in the background. It's the same reason you don't see stars in most daytime photographs taken from Earth, and those strange, non-parallel shadows. The moon's surface isn't flat. It's undulating, covered in hills, craters, and slopes. When light hits this uneven terrain, it creates shadows that can appear to go in different directions. It's a phenomenon of perspective and topography, not of Hollywood stage lighting. Beyond these technical points, there's the overwhelming physical evidence. The Apollo missions brought back hundreds of pounds of moon rocks, which have been analyzed by scientists all over the world, including those in nations that were rivals of the United States. Their unique geochemical composition is utterly unlike anything found on Earth and matches what we would expect from a world without an atmosphere or water. Furthermore, we have left behind reflective laser-ranging retroreflectors on the lunar surface. To this day, observatories on Earth can fire a laser at those spots and measure the beam's return trip, precisely confirming the moon's distance, an experiment that would be impossible if those devices weren't actually there. So while the questions posed by the hoax theory are compelling and speak to a healthy skepticism of authority, the collective weight of the scientific, historical, and physical evidence paints a very clear picture. Humanity really did take those historic steps on another world. Yet the theory persists, a powerful testament to how a compelling narrative can sometimes overshadow even the most concrete of facts. Moving from the moon to our planetary neighbor, we arrive at number 24 on our list, a theory born from a single, grainy photograph that captured the world's imagination and refused to let go. In July of 1976, NASA Viking 1 orbiter was systematically mapping the Martian surface, searching for potential landing sites, when it passed over a region known as Cydonia. The images it sent back were typically scientific and starkly beautiful, but one frame stood out dramatically from all the rest. It appeared to show a gigantic human face, nearly 2 miles from end to end, staring blankly up from the rusty landscape. When a NASA employee released the image to the public, he casually captioned it with a mention of a face-like hill, likely never anticipating the firestorm of speculation he was about to ignite. For many, this was not a trick of light and shadow. It was evidence. The idea took hold that this was no natural formation, but a colossal artifact, a monument left behind by an ancient, intelligent Martian civilization, perhaps as a deliberate message to the stars or a solemn memorial to their own lost world. The image arrived at a perfect cultural moment, tapping into a renewed public fascination with ancient astronauts and the possibility that we are not alone. Books were written, documentaries were filmed, and the face on Mars became a pop culture icon, a symbol for everything that might be hidden in the uncharted territories of our solar system. Proponents of the theory pointed to its apparent symmetry, the clear presence of what looked like eyes, a nose, and a mouth, arguing that such precise features could not possibly occur by chance on a dead, wind-swept world. They suggested that other nearby formations, dubbed the City and the Pyramid, were the ruins of a vast metropolitan complex, with the face serving as its central ceremonial figurehead. For 2 decades, this single, blurry image fueled an entire subculture of belief. Then, the skeptics got better data. Decades later, new missions with vastly superior camera technology arrived at Mars. The Mars Global Surveyor in the late 1990s, and later, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter were able to photograph the Cydonia region with incredible resolution, revealing the face in stark, unambiguous detail. The new images showed a rather ordinary, heavily eroded mesa, a flat-topped hill covered with sand and pockmarked by impacts. The symmetry seen in the original Viking photo was revealed to be an illusion, a combination of a low-resolution camera, a specific angle of sunlight, and the powerful human tendency to see familiar patterns in random shapes, a psychological phenomenon known as pareidolia. This is the same instinct that lets us see animals in clouds or a man in the moon. Scientists explained that the region was full of similar mesas, all shaped by billions of years of natural geological processes, wind erosion, landslides, and thermal cycling. To the vast majority of the scientific community, the case was definitively closed. Yet, for a core group of believers, the new high-resolution images did not debunk the theory, they refined it. Some argued that while the main structure was indeed natural, it had been artificially carved and enhanced by an ancient culture. Others pointed to specific angles and alignments within the formation that they claimed were too mathematically precise to be accidental, suggesting a possible connection to other earthly ancient sites. The story of the face on Mars is a powerful lesson in how we see the universe. It highlights the profound gap between the grainy, low-data realm of mystery and the crisp, high-definition world of scientific analysis. It was a mystery born from a lack of information, and ultimately, it was solved by an overabundance of it. The face wasn't a gateway to a lost Martian city, but it became something else entirely, a cultural touchstone that, for a time, made the vast, impersonal cosmos feel strangely personal, as if we were being watched by a silent, stone sentinel from another world. It reminds us that the desire to find meaning in the void is a fundamental part of our exploration, a drive that continues to push us to look closer, to send better cameras, and to forever question what might be waiting just beyond the next crater. But if the moon landings and the face on Mars were public spectacles, what about the evidence that isn't so easily seen? This brings us to number 23 on our list, a theory that strikes at the very heart of our space exploration efforts. The idea that NASA and other space agencies are actively hiding proof of alien life. This isn't about a single dramatic event, but rather a slow, persistent drip of alleged cover-ups. A pattern of secrecy that believers say points to a monumental truth being kept from the public. The core accusation is that agencies like NASA routinely sanitize the data they release, airbrushing images, censoring audio feeds, and doctoring video to systematically remove any anomalies that could suggest we are not alone. This theory gained immense traction with the dawn of the internet, as a global army of amateur sleuths began scrutinizing every single photograph beamed back from the Mars rovers. They argue that the official, pristine images we see on NASA website are a carefully curated product, a safe for public consumption version of reality, while the raw, unedited feeds sometimes tell a different story. One of the most famous examples is the so-called Mars rat. In 2013, a photograph from the Curiosity rover showed a peculiar, dark object nestled among the rocks. To many viewers, its shape, complete with what appeared to be a head, body, and even a long tail, was unmistakably rodent-like. The online world exploded with speculation. Was it a fossilized Martian creature? A living animal scurrying just out of frame? The idea was so compelling because it was so familiar. We know what rats look like. Scientists, however, were quick to offer a more mundane geological explanation. They identified the object as a simple rock, most likely a type of volcanic rock called a basalt, that had been weathered by the relentless Martian wind into an unusual but entirely natural shape. They pointed out that the tenuous Martian atmosphere, freezing temperatures, and high levels of radiation make the surface an utterly inhospitable place for any life as we know it, let alone a complex mammal. Yet for believers, the rat was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. They point to other curious finds. A mysterious, donut-shaped object that seemed to appear between two sets of rover images, a fragment that looked eerily like a thigh bone, and even a shiny, metallic-looking protrusion dubbed the Mars spoon. In each case, the scientific community has provided plausible, non-biological explanations, from unusual rock formations and pieces of debris from the rover's own landing to the simple, powerful effects of pareidolia, our brain's hardwired habit of seeing meaningful shapes in random patterns. Beyond the Martian surface, this conspiracy extends into the void of space itself. There are long-standing claims that astronaut transmissions from orbit or the moon are deliberately delayed and censored. The most famous of these involves the so-called lost tapes of the Apollo 11 mission, where some believe the astronauts reported seeing unidentified objects, while NASA acknowledges some audio was lost due to data recording issues of the era. They firmly deny any deliberate censorship of extraterrestrial encounters. The rationale proposed for this alleged global cover-up varies. Some suggest it's about preventing worldwide panic, a concept famously explored in fictional works like The Day the Earth Stood Still. Others believe it's about power controlling the monumental technological and philosophical implications of first contact. And still others think it's a matter of bureaucracy, that the truth is locked away not out of malice, but because the scientific establishment is inherently conservative and unwilling to accept evidence that doesn't fit its rigid protocols. The official position from NASA and the broader scientific community is one of open, active searching. They emphasize that missions like the Perseverance rover are explicitly designed to look for biosignatures, signs of past life. They argue that if definitive proof were found, it would be the greatest discovery in human history, and there would be no incentive to hide it. The process of science, they explain, is inherently cautious. An unusual rock is just a rock until a battery of tests can prove it is something more. The enduring power of this conspiracy theory lies in the vast, impersonal nature of space exploration. We are utterly reliant on a handful of agencies to be our eyes and ears on other worlds. When they present us with a strangely shaped rock and call it a geological curiosity, a part of us wonders if we're being told the whole story. It's a theory built on the gaps between what we see and what we imagine, a testament to the idea that the most profound secret in the universe might not be hidden in the darkness between the stars, but in the plain sight of a photograph, waiting for us to look closely enough. Now, let's turn our attention from the red sands of Mars to the silent, cold expanse of Earth's own orbit, where one of the most enigmatic and persistent space conspiracy theories has captured imaginations for generations. At number 22 on our list, is the legend of the Black Knight satellite, an alleged ancient alien probe that some believe has been circling our planet for thousands of years, watching and waiting. The story of the Black Knight is a fascinating patchwork of misinterpreted science, genuine space history, and pure myth, all woven together into a compelling narrative of pre-human spaceflight. The tale truly begins in the late 19th century with the pioneering work of Nikola Tesla. In 1899, while experimenting with his massive radio transmitter in Colorado Springs, Tesla reported picking up strange, repeating rhythmic signals. He was convinced they were not of terrestrial origin, and he famously speculated that they might be an attempt at communication from another world. Decades later, in the 1920s, amateur radio operators began reporting similar odd echoes radio waves that seemed to bounce back to Earth after an unusually long delay, as if they had traveled out to an unseen object in a very high orbit and then returned. These long-delayed echoes fueled speculation that an unknown satellite was already up there, reflecting our own transmissions back to us. The name Black Knight itself is often linked to a 1954 article in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, which reported that the U.S. Air Force had detected two mysterious satellites orbiting Earth at a time when no nation had yet demonstrated the capability to launch one. This report, later attributed to misidentified natural objects or possibly secret military prototypes, added a layer of official intrigue to the growing legend. But the theory truly exploded into popular culture in the 1960s, when the first human-made satellites were still new and wondrous. A photograph taken by the Mercury Atlas 7 mission in 1962 seemed to show a dark, irregular-shaped object in the distance. Proponents of the Black Knight theory seized on this image as the first visual proof, suggesting it was a massive, artificial object of unknown origin. The most captivating part of the legend is its proposed timeline. Some believers suggest the satellite is not just decades old, but millennia old, perhaps 13,000 years. They point to interpretations of ancient Sumerian texts or speculate that it could be a relic from a lost, advanced civilization, or even a probe sent by extraterrestrials to monitor the development of humankind. The idea that a silent sentinel has been orbiting our world since before the dawn of recorded history is a powerfully haunting one. It taps into the ancient astronaut hypothesis and suggests that our technological age is merely a rediscovery of knowledge that was already present in the cosmos. However, the modern scientific reality of the Black Knight is far less mysterious, yet equally interesting in its own right. The most concrete resolution to the puzzle came in 1998. During a Space Shuttle Endeavour mission to the International Space Station, astronauts conducted a spacewalk and retrieved a piece of debris that had been lost during an earlier mission. The object was a thermal blanket that had worked loose from the shuttle's own cargo bay. Photographs of this dark, tumbling blanket, set against the stunning backdrop of Earth, bear a striking resemblance to the descriptions and grainy images associated with the Black Knight. For the scientific community, this case is largely closed. The strange signals heard by Tesla and others are explained as natural phenomena, solar flares, pulsars, or atmospheric interference. The long-delayed echoes have been recreated in laboratory experiments and are considered a quirk of plasma physics. The various photographs cited as evidence, including the famous one from 1962, are consistently identified as either space junk, discarded equipment from the very missions taking the pictures, or even parts of the spacecraft itself that happen to float into view, like a lost thermal cover or a detached panel. The The power of the Black Knight legend lies not in its factual accuracy, but in its narrative appeal. It represents a perfect storm of mystery, combining the romance of early radio, the fear and excitement of the Cold War space race, and our timeless fascination with the idea that we are not the first intelligence to look up at the stars. It's a story that transforms a piece of mundane space junk into an artifact of cosmic significance, reminding us that in the vast, quiet darkness above, it is sometimes easier to believe in ancient watchers than to accept the simple, lonely truth of our own orbiting detritus. While we often look to the future or to nearby worlds for cosmic mysteries, one of the most enduring theories suggests that the greatest threat to humanity has been hiding within our own solar system all along, waiting to return. At number 21, we delve into the story of Nibiru, also known as Planet X, a supposed hidden world on a long, elliptical orbit that some believe is destined for a catastrophic collision with Earth. This theory is a powerful fusion of reinterpreted ancient mythology, modern doomsday fears, and a deep-seated distrust of official astronomical science. The entire concept, as it exists in popular culture today, largely stems from the work of author Zecharia Sitchin, who published a series of books beginning in the 1970s. Sitchin claimed to have translated ancient Sumerian cuneiform tablets, and his interpretations were nothing short of revolutionary. He proposed that these texts told of a race of beings called the Anunnaki, who hailed from a previously unknown planet called Nibiru. According to Sitchin, Nibiru follows a massive 3,600-year orbit around the Sun, and during its periodic passages through our inner solar system, the Anunnaki came to Earth. He wrote that they genetically engineered early hominids to create Homo sapiens as a slave race to mine gold, essentially positioning human civilization as the creation of ancient astronauts. The modern doomsday element entered the picture when others extrapolated from Sitchin's work, calculating that Nibiru's next return was imminent. Various dates have been proposed over the years, with predictions often clustering around the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012, creating a global wave of anxiety. Believers warned that the gravitational influence of this approaching giant would trigger pole shifts, immense earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tidal waves, effectively ending the world as we know it. The appeal of the Nibiru theory is multifaceted. It provides a grand, cosmic narrative for our origins, tying humanity's creation directly to advanced interstellar beings. It also taps into a primal fear of annihilation from the skies, a theme that resonates deeply in our collective psyche. Furthermore, it positions its adherents as enlightened truth seekers, privy to hidden knowledge found in ancient texts that the scientific establishment either cannot understand or is actively suppressing. From an astronomical perspective, however, the theory faces insurmountable obstacles. If a planet with the described mass and orbit, one large enough to wreak gravitational havoc, were anywhere near the inner solar system, it would be glaringly obvious to both professional and amateur astronomers. Its gravitational pull would have already caused detectable perturbations in the orbits of the known planets, particularly Neptune and Uranus. We have mapped the solar system with incredible precision, and no such object has been found. Projects like NASA Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, or WISE, have conducted comprehensive sky surveys specifically looking for large, hidden objects in the far reaches of our system. While they have found many new minor planets and brown dwarfs in the outer darkness, they have found no evidence of a Nibiru. Critics of the theory also point to the foundational flaw in Sitchin's work. The vast majority of academic Sumerian scholars and archaeologists have thoroughly rejected his translations. They argue that Sitchin, who was not a trained Assyriologist, misinterpreted the complex language and symbolism. The cuneiform signs he interpreted as referring to a 12th planet, Nibiru, are more commonly understood by experts to have other meanings, often referring to known celestial bodies like Jupiter or Mercury, or to concepts like a crossing or a ferry boat in a mythological context. The Anunnaki are widely accepted in academia as deities in the Mesopotamian pantheon, gods of the underworld and sky, not literal extraterrestrial astronauts. So why does the theory persist with such vigor, even after its predicted doomsdays have come and gone? The answer lies in the powerful nature of apocalyptic belief systems. When a predicted cataclysm fails to materialize, it rarely kills the belief. Instead, believers often engage in what sociologists call cognitive dissonance reduction. The date was simply miscalculated, the interpretation was slightly off, or the event is now spiritual rather than physical. The core belief in the hidden planet and the grand conspiracy to keep it secret remains intact, adapting and finding a new future date. The story of Nibiru is less about astronomy and more about the human need for grand narratives. It connects our deepest past to our ultimate future in a single, dramatic story arc. It transforms the cold, impersonal mechanics of the solar system into a stage for a divine or alien drama in which humanity plays a central role. In a universe that can often seem random and indifferent, the idea that our very creation and potential destruction are tied to the orbit of a mysterious world provides a strange, and for some, a comforting sense of cosmic purpose. Now, we turn from hidden planets and ancient probes to a theory that challenges the very foundation of our understanding of the world beneath our feet. At number 20 on our list, we confront one of the most audacious and, to many, perplexing conspiracy theories of the modern era: the belief that the Earth is not a globe, but a flat, disc-shaped plane, and that NASA is the chief architect of a global deception designed to conceal this fundamental truth. While the idea of a flat Earth is ancient, its contemporary resurgence is a fascinating phenomenon, fueled by internet communities, social media algorithms, and a profound distrust of institutional authority. Modern flat earthers propose a model where our world is a disk, with the North Pole at the center and a massive wall of ice, Antarctica, forming the impenetrable rim around the circumference. The sun and moon, they argue, are not massive, distant spheres, but much smaller local lights that circle above the plane like spotlights, creating the illusion of day and night. The stars are simply pinpricks of light embedded in a firmament dome that encases the entire system. For adherents, this isn't just a quirky alternative model. It's a worldview that places humanity back at the center of a created, purposeful universe, and they point to a range of observations and perceived inconsistencies to support their claims. One of their primary arguments centers on perception and scale. They often state that the Earth looks flat to the naked eye. From our everyday vantage point, the horizon appears as a straight line, and we cannot perceive the curvature without aid. They question why, if we are spinning at over 1,000 miles an hour and orbiting the sun at 67,000 miles per hour, we don't feel any of this tremendous motion. Their explanation for gravity is particularly inventive. They reject the concept of mass-based gravitational attraction, suggesting instead that the flat Earth is constantly accelerating upwards at a rate of 9.8 meters per second squared, which creates the sensation we interpret as gravity. This, of course, leads to its own set of profound physical impossibilities. But for believers, it solves the problem of why everything falls down without needing a spherical planet. When it comes to the evidence provided by space agencies, flat earthers see not proof, but the very mechanism of the conspiracy. They argue that every single photograph of the round Earth from space, from the iconic blue marble shot to the live feeds from the International Space Station, is a computer-generated fake. They contend that NASA, along with other world governments, spends billions of taxpayers' dollars not on actual space exploration, but on producing elaborate CGI and Hollywood-style special effects to perpetuate the globe myth. Why would they do this? The proposed motives vary. Some suggest it's a matter of control, that by convincing humanity we are an insignificant speck in a vast, random cosmos, they can push godless ideologies like evolution and undermine religious faith. Others believe it's fundamentally financial, a way for a corrupt scientific establishment to secure endless funding for a fictional endeavor. And others see a deeper, more sinister purpose rooted in historical power structures. The counter-evidence from science and simple observation is, from a conventional perspective, overwhelming. We can watch ships sail away over the horizon, their hulls disappearing before their masts, a direct consequence of curvature. We can observe the circular shadow of the Earth on the Moon during a lunar eclipse. Different constellations are visible from the northern and southern hemispheres, which only makes sense on a spherical planet. The very existence of time zones, the Coriolis' effect on weather patterns, and the ability of anyone with a decent telescope to watch the spherical planets rotate. All of these phenomena are elegantly explained by a heliocentric model and are either impossible or require wildly convoluted explanations on a flat plane. Perhaps the most compelling modern rebuttal comes from the countless amateur efforts to test the flat Earth hypothesis. High-altitude balloons equipped with cameras have repeatedly captured the curve of the horizon. Simple laser experiments over large bodies of water, like the Bedford Level experiment, have been recreated with precise modern equipment, consistently confirming curvature. And then there are the personal experiences of pilots and sailors whose navigation and fuel calculations would be catastrophically wrong if the Earth were not a sphere. The persistence of the flat Earth theory in the 21st century is less about the shape of our planet and more about the state of our society. It represents an extreme form of epistemological rebellion, where personal intuition and the testimony of a trusted online community are valued above the consensus of experts and established scientific methodology. It's a powerful case study in how, when trust in institutions erodes, people can be driven to construct entire alternative realities that feel more authentic and empowering, even if they fly in the face of 2 millennia of accumulated knowledge. The theory forces us to ask a difficult question. In a world saturated with information, how do we decide what is true? For the flat earther, the answer is to trust nothing from the top down, and to believe only what they feel they can verify with their own eyes. In doing so, they have built a cosmology that is, in its own way, as complex and detailed as the one it seeks to replace. A testament to the incredible human capacity to find patterns and meaning, even when looking at a world they are convinced is lying to them. From the shape of our own world to the secrets that might be hidden on our closest celestial neighbor, we arrive at number 19, the compelling theory that the far side of the moon hosts clandestine military bases, constructed in secret by world powers. This idea pushes beyond mere observation and into the realm of high-stakes espionage and hidden technology, suggesting that humanity's presence on the moon did not end with Apollo. Instead, it evolved into a covert, ongoing operation hidden from public view. The far side of the moon, perpetually turned away from Earth, provides the perfect location for such a venture, a place of permanent radio silence and visual concealment, an entire hemisphere of total privacy. Proponents of this theory point to a collection of strange anomalies spotted in official lunar imagery. Certain craters, they argue, exhibit geometric shapes and sharp, angular features that look unsettlingly artificial. Some point to what appear to be towering, spire-like structures casting long, narrow shadows, or vast, domed formations that could theoretically house entire facilities. These aren't just random rocks. Believers insist. They are the telltale signs of construction, the architectural footprints of a hidden lunar program. This narrative is heavily fueled by the testimonies of alleged whistleblowers, whose stories, while unverified, have become foundational to the legend. Perhaps the most famous of these is a man named Carl Wolf, who claimed that while working with the U.S. Air Force in the 1960s, he saw high-resolution lunar orbiter photographs that clearly showed structures, including massive towers and digging machines, on the far side of the moon. Another key figure is former U.S. Army Sergeant Carla Turner, who spoke of clandestine operations and secret space fleets, though her accounts are often debated. These insider claims, however fringe, add a layer of human testimony that transforms grainy pixels into a potential reality. The proposed motivations for such an unimaginably expensive and secretive undertaking are as varied as they are dramatic. One prevailing idea is the strategic military advantage. A lunar base would represent the ultimate high ground, a location from which to monitor earthly communications and potentially deploy weapons systems with a global reach, all while being virtually untouchable. It's the concept of orbital dominance taken to its absolute extreme. Another motivation centers on technology. Some suggest that these bases are not just human constructions, but are built around, or even with the help of, recovered extraterrestrial technology. This ties the theory directly into the wider UFO narrative, proposing that the moon is not just a barren rock, but a strategic outpost, or even a repository of alien artifacts that shadow governments are desperately trying to understand and reverse engineer. There's also the resource argument. The moon is known to be rich in helium-3, an isotope extremely rare on Earth, but considered a potential fuel for future fusion reactors. A secret base could, in theory, be the center for a clandestine mining operation, securing an unimaginable energy fortune for whichever nation controls it. From a scientific and logistical standpoint, the challenges of such a program are staggering. The notion of building and supplying a permanent, hidden base on the moon with current or even near-future technology, without any leaks from the thousands of contractors and scientists required, seems almost insurmountable. The energy required for life support alone would be massive, and the thermal signature of a functioning base would likely be detectable by our most powerful Earth-based telescopes and orbiting satellites. Skeptics and scientists explain the anomalous structures as classic examples of pareidolia combined with the unique, harsh lighting conditions of the lunar surface. The moon has no atmosphere to soften shadows, so low-angle sunlight can create incredibly long, sharp, and strangely geometric shadows from entirely natural, jagged terrain. What looks like a perfect tower from one angle can be revealed as a crumbling rock pinnacle from another. Craters are formed by violent impacts that can leave behind all sorts of unusual formations, including central peaks and terraced walls that can appear artificially structured when seen in two-dimensional photographs. Furthermore, the scientific community points out that we have actually mapped the far side of the moon in incredible detail with missions like NASA Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. The data is public, and while it reveals a world of fascinating geology, it shows no evidence of cities, landing pads, or massive industrial complexes. The enduring power of the secret base theory, however, doesn't necessarily rely on hard evidence. It thrives on the potent combination of a genuine, hidden landscape and our innate understanding of human ambition. We know that nations keep secrets, that they compete for power, and that the drive for strategic advantage is a constant throughout history. Placing that age-old struggle onto the silent, gray canvas of the lunar far side creates a story that feels both terrifying and plausible. It suggests that the final frontier is not a place of peaceful exploration for all humankind, but just another theater for secret conflicts and hidden ambitions, a silent war being waged in the perpetual darkness just beyond our sight. But what about the things we heard during humanity's greatest adventure? Beyond the photographs and video footage, the audio recordings from the Apollo missions have become a rich hunting ground for conspiracy theorists, leading us to number 18 on our list, the Apollo program audio anomalies. This theory suggests that the crackling, static-filled radio transmissions between the astronauts and mission control contain hidden proof of encounters with unidentified objects and alien artifacts, evidence that was supposedly censored through deliberate periods of silence and unexplained communication blackouts. The very nature of these audio feeds lends itself to mystery. They are often filled with the hiss of cosmic static, overlapping voices, and technical jargon, creating a chaotic soundscape where the human ear is tempted to find patterns and meaning in the noise. One of the most famous and widely circulated examples comes from the Apollo 11 mission, the very first lunar landing. After the lunar module Eagle had undocked and was preparing for its historic descent, there was a brief period of communication silence. When the audio link was reestablished, some listeners claimed to have heard a strange, almost musical sound transmitted from the astronaut's end. In various online recordings, this has been interpreted as anything from discordant alien music to the whirring of unknown machinery. Believers argue this was the moment Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin encountered something they weren't supposed to see. Perhaps a fleet of UFOs monitoring their approach, or the haunting sounds of a long-abandoned alien facility. The official explanation from NASA is far less dramatic, but rooted in the practical realities of 1960s radio technology. Engineers and audio specialists who have analyzed the recordings identify the sound as simple radio interference. The Apollo spacecraft used multiple, close proximity radio transmitters for different communication channels, one for voice, another for telemetry data. These transmitters could and did interfere with each other, creating a phenomenon known as heterodyny. This occurs when two radio frequencies are very close together, producing a third, audible beat frequency that manifests as a wavering, whistling tone. It's essentially the same kind of electronic crosstalk you might have heard on an old analog radio when two stations bled into one another. The sound wasn't music from another world. It was the predictable, if slightly inconvenient, signature of our own technology pushing its limits in a new environment. Another persistent audio legend involves the Apollo 10 mission, which served as the dress rehearsal for the Apollo 11 landing, orbiting the moon and testing all procedures without actually touching down. During their journey around the far side of the moon, the crew was out of contact with Earth for the expected period of radio blackout. The transcripts and recordings from this period later released to the public, contain a remarkable exchange between astronauts Eugene Cernan and John Young. They can be heard discussing a weird music or a whistling sound that they are picking up through their headsets. Cernan describes it as really outer spacey music, and the crew even debates whether they should report it to Mission Control, concerned that they might be seen as crazy. For UFO enthusiasts, this is a smoking gun. Here, on the far side of the moon, completely isolated from earthly radio transmissions, 3 highly trained and level-headed astronauts are clearly disturbed by a sound they cannot explain. The implication is that they were hearing something artificial, a broadcast or emission that was not of natural origin. The scientific explanation, once again, points to a mundane but fascinating radio phenomenon. A detailed NASA analysis concluded that the strange noise was the result of interference between the lunar module's and command module's very high frequency, or VHF, radios. When the 2 spacecraft were in close proximity and their antennas were aligned in just the right way, their VHF signals could interfere with each other, even when the radios were not actively set to transmit to one another. This created the whistling, ethereal sound that so captivated the crew. It was, in effect, a phantom signal generated by the spacecraft themselves, a technological ghost in the machine. The periods of radio silence or blackouts are also a key part of this conspiracy. Theorists suggest that these were not just natural occurrences when the spacecraft passed behind the moon, blocking the line of sight to Earth, but were instead deliberately extended by NASA to censor transmissions they didn't want the public to hear. They point to moments where communications seemed to cut out abruptly during tense or critical moments of the missions. The reality of space communication in the 1960s was inherently fragile. It relied on a global network of ground-based antennas that had to perfectly track the spacecraft. Any minor malfunction, atmospheric disturbance, or simple misalignment could cause a temporary loss of signal. Furthermore, the astronauts themselves often switched between different communication channels for private medical discussions or technical troubleshooting, which would naturally create gaps in the public feed. The enduring intrigue of the Apollo audio anomalies highlights a fundamental aspect of how we process information. Our brains are wired for narrative. When we listen to those historic yet technically flawed recordings, we are hearing the sounds of a genuine, high-stakes adventure. The static isn't just noise, it's the sound of the void. The overlapping voices and technical chatter aren't just confusion. They're the sound of human beings operating at the very edge of their capabilities. It is perhaps the most human response in the world to listen to that tense, otherworldly audio and wonder if, in the gaps between the words, we can hear the faint, whispering evidence that we were not alone out there. The truth may be less sensational, but it is no less impressive. These sounds are the authentic record of human courage and ingenuity, punctuated not by alien choirs, but by the humble, persistent crackle of our own first, tentative steps into the cosmos. Shifting our focus from strange sounds and lunar anomalies, we arrive at a conspiracy theory rooted not in ambiguous photographs, but in hard scientific data that, according to a small but vocal group of researchers, was misinterpreted and then systematically dismissed by the very agency that collected it. At number 17, we examine the provocative claim known as the Martian bioplume theory, which posits that NASA-owned Viking landers may have discovered microbial life on Mars back in the 1970s, and that the agency has been downplaying this monumental finding ever since. To understand why this theory has such staying power, we need to go back to the summer of 1976, when the twin Viking landers touched down on the rusty Martian soil. These were not just simple cameras. They were sophisticated, miniaturized biological laboratories, and their most crucial experiment was called the Labeled Release, or LR experiment. Designed by the brilliant physicist Gilbert Levin, its principle was elegant in its simplicity. A sample of Martian soil was scooped up by the lander's robotic arm and placed into a small chamber. A droplet of a nutrient-rich, radioactive carbon-labeled solution was then added. The idea was this: if microscopic life existed in the soil, it would consume the nutrients and metabolize them, releasing radioactive carbon dioxide gas as a waste product. A sensor would then detect this telltale gas, signaling a positive result for life. To the astonishment of the team back on Earth, the experiment worked almost perfectly. Shortly after the nutrient was added, the Viking 1 lander registered a significant spike in radioactive gas. The graph shot upwards, a clear and strong positive signal. Even more compelling, when the experiment was run a second time after heating the soil sample to a temperature that would be lethal to known microbes, the result was negative. No gas was released. This control seemed to confirm that the initial reaction was indeed biological. It looked, for all the world, like humanity had just found its first proof of extraterrestrial life. But then, the story took a complicated turn. The other two biological experiments on board, which used different methods to search for life, came back with ambiguous or negative results. More critically, the lander's gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, an instrument designed to analyze the chemical composition of the soil, found no evidence of organic molecules, the complex carbon-based building blocks that all known life requires. For the majority of the Viking science team, this was the deciding factor. How could there be life without any organic material present? The consensus formed that the positive LR result was not biological, but was instead caused by a strange and previously unknown chemical reaction in the Martian soil. They hypothesized that the soil contained powerful reactive oxidants, like peroxides or superoxides, which could have broken down the nutrient solution and released the carbon dioxide through a purely non-biological process. This became the official explanation, and the dream of finding life on Mars was shelved for decades. For Gilbert Levin, however, the case was never closed. He maintained until his passing that his experiment had, in fact, detected life, and he spent years meticulously challenging the chemical explanation. He and a small group of supportive scientists argued that the oxidant theory was speculative and couldn't fully replicate the precise behavior of the LR results, particularly the fact that the reaction was so rapid and so completely eliminated by heating. They pointed out that the other life detection experiments were less sensitive and could have easily missed a sparse or unusual microbial population. This is where the conspiracy theory truly ignites. Proponents accuse NASA of institutional bias and a profound aversion to risk. They argue that the agency, fearing a public backlash or accusations of incompetence if they announced life and were later proven wrong, deliberately chose the safer, more conservative chemical explanation. They suggest that subsequent Mars missions were deliberately designed not to look for direct evidence of current life, but only for signs of past habitability or organic molecules, thereby avoiding a repeat of the Viking dilemma. This narrative paints a picture of a scientific establishment that is so terrified of a false positive that it is willing to ignore a true positive. The theory gained new fuel in the 21st century with the concept of the bioplume. Some researchers, reanalyzing old Viking data alongside new findings from later rovers, have suggested that the distribution of methane gas in the Martian atmosphere appears to be patchy and seasonal. On Earth, the vast majority of methane is produced by biological activity. The idea of a Martian bioplume is that transient releases of methane, potentially from subsurface microbial colonies, could explain both the Viking LR results and the modern methane detections. If the Viking lander just happened to touch down in an area experiencing such a plume, it would have sampled soil teeming with active microbes, producing the dramatic positive signal. The counter-arguments from the mainstream scientific community remain robust. The lack of organics detected by Viking is still a massive hurdle. While later missions like Curiosity have since found simple organic molecules in Martian rocks, they are present in concentrations far lower than what would be expected in a living ecosystem. Furthermore, non-biological processes for methane production are well documented, such as serpentinization, a reaction between water, carbon dioxide, and certain types of rock that occurs deep underground. The official NASA position is not one of a cover-up, but of rigorous scientific caution. They emphasize that the discovery of extraterrestrial life would be such a monumental, paradigm-shifting event that the evidence must be unequivocal. A single, decades-old experiment with a plausible non-biological explanation simply does not meet that incredibly high standard. The story of the Viking LR experiment and the bioplume theory is a fascinating lesson in the philosophy of science itself. It represents the eternal tension between a bold, revolutionary interpretation and a cautious, conservative one. It forces us to ask, at what point does caution become obstruction? When does the demand for perfect proof prevent us from recognizing good, if imperfect, evidence? For believers, the Viking landers did their job perfectly 45 years ago, and we have been ignoring their whispered answer ever since. For skeptics, we are simply waiting for a signal so clear that it cannot be misunderstood, a discovery that leaves no room for doubt in the complex and dusty soil of another world. But the mysteries of our solar system are not confined to planets and moons. Some of the most staggering claims suggest that the very heart of our system, the Sun itself, is a hub of extraterrestrial activity. At number 10 on our list, we explore the theory of a colossal UFO fleet near the Sun, a hypothesis built entirely on the public analysis of satellite imagery from NASA's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, or SOHO, and its companion, the STEREO mission. These solar observatories provide a continuous, invaluable stream of data, monitoring the Sun's turbulent surface and its violent outbursts. Yet, within this torrent of scientific information, a dedicated community of online investigators claims to have found something astonishing. Not just solitary ships, but vast armadas of what appear to be planet-sized objects, often seen moving in and out of the Sun's corona. The images that fuel this theory are undeniably compelling to the untrained eye. They often show bright, perfectly spherical or cylindrical objects positioned near the Sun's limb. Some appear to be connected by thin, luminous strands, while others are seen in tight, geometric formations, seemingly unaffected by the Sun's unimaginable gravity and heat. Believers argue these cannot be natural phenomena. Their symmetrical shapes and organized behavior point to intelligent control. They suggest we are witnessing a Type II civilization on the Kardashev scale, a society so advanced it can harness the entire energy output of its star. The proposed purpose of these gargantuan structures varies from stellar engineering and energy harvesting to even being portals or gateways for interstellar travel, using the sun's immense power as a cosmic fuel station. The sheer scale of these supposed vessels is what makes the theory so breathtaking. If real, they would be thousands of times larger than Earth, representing a level of technology so far beyond our comprehension that it borders on the divine. For proponents, this isn't just evidence of life, it's evidence of God's living next door. The scientific explanations for these anomalies, however, are firmly rooted in the complex nature of both the sun and the imaging technology we use to study it. The most common cause identified by astronomers and NASA specialists is what's known as a compression artifact. The SOHO and STEREO satellites capture a phenomenal amount of data, which must be heavily compressed before it can be transmitted across the vast distance to Earth. This compression process can sometimes introduce digital noise, creating blocky pixels, streaking lines, or bright blotches that weren't in the original image. When these artifacts occur against the dark backdrop of space near the bright sun, they can easily be misinterpreted as solid, structured objects. Another frequent culprit is blooming. This occurs when a camera's sensor is so overwhelmed by an intense light source, like the sun, that the charge from oversaturated pixels bleeds over into adjacent pixels. This can create the appearance of large, bright shapes extending from the solar disk, shapes that can look unnaturally geometric. Then there are the sun's own natural, but still poorly understood, phenomena. The sun's corona is a seething plasma ocean, constantly ejecting massive loops and filaments of superheated gas. When a particularly dense prominence erupts and is captured in a single frame, it can present a sharp, defined edge that, from a certain angle, looks structured. Furthermore, cosmic rays constantly bombard the spacecraft's cameras. When a high-energy particle strikes the digital sensor, it creates a bright, pinpoint spot or a long, thin trail. On an image of the sun, a cluster of these cosmic ray hits could be mistaken for a formation of smaller craft. Scientists also point to a simpler, more mundane source, dust. Tiny particles of interplanetary dust, often no larger than a grain of sand, can float in front of the camera's lens. When they are illuminated by the sun, they glow brightly, and as they drift, they can create the illusion of motion. These dust specks are a well-known nuisance in astronomy and are routinely edited out of official releases, but they remain in the raw data that conspiracy theorists love to scrutinize. The debate ultimately highlights a fundamental divide in interpretation. One side sees advanced engineering where the other sees digital noise and plasma physics. It's a classic case of an information gap being filled by imagination. We are looking at the most powerful and chaotic object in our neighborhood with instruments that are brilliant yet imperfect. The theory of the solar UFO fleet forces us to confront the limits of our perception. It asks whether we are truly alone in a universe where a star can naturally produce wonders so bizarre that they appear manufactured, or if our cosmic backyard is indeed busier and far more incredible than we have ever dared to dream. Now, let's journey to the outer reaches of our solar system, to a moon so strange it looks less like a world and more like a cosmic walnut. This is Iapetus, the third largest moon of Saturn, and it's a celestial body already shrouded in mystery long before any conspiracy theories emerged. Iapetus is famous for its two-toned coloration. One hemisphere is as dark as charcoal, the other as bright as fresh snow, and for a massive equatorial ridge that circles its middle, giving it that distinct spiky appearance. But nestled within that bizarre landscape, A single, grainy image seemed to reveal something even more impossible, catapulting this distant moon to number 11 on our list. The story begins with the Cassini-Huygens mission, a monumental collaboration between NASA and the European Space Agency that spent 13 years studying Saturn and its moons. In 2004, as Cassini was sending back its first batch of data from the Saturnian system, it captured a photograph of Iapetus from a distance of about 41 miles. On the darkened hemisphere of the moon, right along the terminator line where day meets night, a small, bright feature stood out. But it wasn't its brightness that caused a stir, it was its shape. To many who saw the image, this object appeared to be a perfect geometric cube, sitting on the surface as if deliberately placed there. The online world immediately lit up with speculation. This was no random rock formation, believers argued. It was a monolith, an artificial structure of immense proportions, potentially miles across. The comparison to the enigmatic black monolith from the film 2001, A Space Odyssey, was immediate and irresistible. Here, it seemed, was real-life evidence of an alien artifact, a marker or a beacon left by an ancient civilization, waiting on this lonely, frozen moon for someone to discover it. The theory suggested that such a perfectly geometric shape simply could not form through natural geological processes. Its sharp 90-degree angles and flat surfaces were seen as the unmistakable signature of intelligent design. Some proposed it was a gateway or a piece of colossal machinery, while others saw it as a monument, a deliberate signpost in the void meant to signal that this place was once visited, or perhaps even inhabited. The location of the object only added to the mystique. Positioned on the edge of the light, it was illuminated by a low-angle sun, casting a long, dramatic shadow that seemed to emphasize its cuboid form. For those convinced of its artificial nature, the Iapetus cube became a cornerstone of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, proof that our solar system was once the stage for activities far beyond human history. When scientists at NASA looked at the same image, however, they saw something entirely different. The first and most critical point they raised was the resolution of the photograph. The image that sparked the frenzy was taken from a great distance and has a resolution where each individual pixel represents an area over a mile wide on the moon's surface. At that scale, the jagged, irregular peak of a large mountain or a mesa, when rendered by just a handful of pixels, can easily take on a blocky, cubic appearance. It's a classic case of a digital illusion created by pixelation, where the limited data forces complex shapes into simple geometric blocks. This is not unlike how a detailed image becomes a collection of chunky squares when you zoom in too far on a low-resolution picture. The human brain, ever eager to find familiar patterns, then does the rest of the work, a phenomenon we've discussed before known as pareidolia. We see a cube because our minds are conditioned to recognize right angles and straight lines, not because they are actually there. Furthermore, the Cassini mission didn't just take one picture and move on. In subsequent flybys, the spacecraft captured images of the same region from much closer ranges and at different sun angles. These higher resolution photographs revealed the cube for what it truly is, the central peak of a large impact crater. What appeared as a single, solid cube from afar was, in reality, a massive, complex geological formation with sloping sides, jagged ridges, and a deeply textured surface, everything you would expect from a natural mountain, and nothing like a smooth, artificial monolith. The long, dark shadow that initially seemed to confirm its shape was simply the shadow of this large peak, stretched across the crater floor by the low sun. The scientific explanation doesn't rob the discovery of its wonder. It merely redirects it. The fact that a distant mountain can trick our eyes so completely is a powerful reminder of the limitations of our perception when exploring deep space. We are often seeing these alien worlds through a keyhole, with data that is incomplete and imperfect. The story of the Iapetus cube is a perfect microcosm of the space conspiracy genre. It begins with a genuine, fascinating anomaly in legitimate scientific data. That anomaly is then interpreted through a lens of excitement and a desire for cosmic companionship, creating a narrative that is far more thrilling than the initial, cautious scientific assessment. It's a tug of war between the awesome possibilities of the imagination and the slow, meticulous work of analysis. In the end, the cube on Iapetus wasn't a gateway to another dimension or a message from a lost civilization. It was a mountain, a testament to the violent, impactful history of our solar system. But for a brief, captivating moment, it allowed us to look at a pixelated smudge on a frozen moon and see not just a rock, but a symbol, a reminder that the universe is full of shapes that tease our curiosity, inviting us to look closer, to send better cameras, and to forever wonder what might be hiding in the next fuzzy image from the deep. Yet, while we often focus on American missions, a shadowy and deeply compelling conspiracy theory suggests that humanity's path to the stars was paved not with triumph, but with tragic, hidden sacrifices. At number 12, we uncover the chilling claim known as the lost cosmonaut theory, the idea that the Soviet Union, desperate to beat the United States in the early days of the space race, secretly launched multiple cosmonauts into orbit before Yuri Gagarin's historic flight, and that these pioneers perished in space, their deaths systematically covered up by the Kremlin. This narrative paints a starkly different picture of the space race, one of ruthless political pressure and a willingness to sacrifice lives for the sake of propaganda. The theory gained its most significant traction from a pair of Italian brothers, Achille and Giovanni Giudica Cordiglia, who set up their own amateur radio listening station just outside of Turin in the late 1950s. As the space race intensified, they began recording every transmission they could intercept from Soviet spacecraft. They claimed to have captured a series of disturbing broadcasts in the years leading up to Gagarin's famous mission in April of 1961. One of their most infamous recordings, allegedly from May of 1960, is said to feature the faint, frantic SOS calls of a dying craft, its signals growing weaker until they fade into silence. Another, from early 1961, purportedly captures the troubled breathing and irregular heartbeat of a cosmonaut in clear distress. The most haunting of all is a recording they attribute to February 1961, in which a female cosmonaut is heard lamenting her fate as her capsule is said to have veered off course, her voice crackling through the static with the words, "I am hot. I see flames. Am I going to crash? Yes, I am." These recordings, if authentic, would be undeniable proof of catastrophic, unacknowledged missions. They tell a story of individual courage snuffed out by state secrecy, of heroes whose names were erased from history. Believers in the theory point to other circumstantial evidence to build their case. They note the unusual gaps and inconsistencies in the official Soviet space program timeline, suggesting these silences were deliberate, meant to conceal failures. They highlight the intense secrecy that shrouded the Soviet program, where successes were loudly celebrated, but setbacks were never mentioned. The sudden, mysterious disappearances or demotions of certain engineers and officials have also been cited as evidence of a purge following a disastrous, hidden mission. The proposed motive for such an elaborate and cruel cover-up is rooted in the fever-pitch atmosphere of the Cold War. Beating America into space was a matter of immense national pride and global ideological supremacy for the USSR. The political cost of admitting that cosmonauts had died in failed attempts, especially after publicly proclaiming the absolute safety and superiority of their technology, would have been catastrophic. From this perspective, silencing the truth was seen as a necessary, if brutal, act of state preservation. However, when subjected to rigorous scrutiny, the evidence for the lost cosmonauts begins to unravel. Major historians of the Soviet space program and audio forensics experts have thoroughly analyzed the Judica Cordiglia brothers' recordings. The findings are deeply problematic for the theory. First, there is the issue of verification. The brothers never provided the original, unedited tapes for independent analysis, only their own compilations and transcripts. Without the raw data, it is impossible to confirm the time, date, or origin of the transmissions. Experts suggest that the audio could have been fabricated, misinterpreted, or could even be recordings from unmanned satellite tests or high-altitude balloon experiments, which often carried biological payloads with animal sounds and telemetry that could be mistaken for a human heartbeat. Furthermore, the technical feasibility of their interceptions is highly questionable. Tracking a spacecraft in orbit requires precise knowledge of its trajectory and powerful, directional antennae. It seems implausible that two amateur radio operators in Italy could reliably and repeatedly lock onto the specific frequency and path of a secret Soviet mission, especially when the official, well-equipped American intelligence agencies with global listening posts have never corroborated any of these claims. With the fall of the Soviet Union and the opening of many previously classified archives, historians have gained a much clearer picture of the early Soviet space program. While they did indeed experience tragic accidents and fatalities, these were all during ground tests or training. The most famous of these was the death of Valentin Bondarenko in 1960, who perished in a high-pressure, pure oxygen chamber fire during a ground-based simulation. There is simply no documentary evidence, no internal memos, no manufacturing records for extra capsules, no mission protocols or post-mortem reports that supports the launch and loss of a cosmonaut before Gagarin. The official records show a program that was indeed reckless in its haste, but also one that was methodical. They tested with dogs and unmanned capsules before risking a human life. Gagarin's flight, while incredibly daring, was the culmination of a logical, sequential testing program. The story of the lost cosmonauts endures not because of verifiable proof, but because of its powerful emotional resonance. It is a cosmic ghost story, a tragic opera playing out in the silent theater of space. It speaks to our fears about the human cost of ambition and the dark side of national pride. We know that governments keep secrets, and the Soviet state was one of the most secretive in history. The theory fills the historical silence with a narrative of unsung heroes, giving a voice to the voids in the official record. It serves as a haunting reminder that for every name we celebrate in the history of exploration, there may be countless others, lost not to the void of space, but to the forgotten corners of our own world. Yet, if we cannot trust the images from our solar system, what about the vistas from the great observatory that peers into the deepest reaches of the cosmos? This brings us to number 13, the pervasive belief that the Hubble Space Telescope has captured mind-shattering evidence of everything from alien megastructures to ethereal realms, and that a veil of secrecy keeps these discoveries locked away from public view. Launched into orbit in 1990, Hubble was designed to be humanity's ultimate eye on the universe, free from the distorting effects of Earth's atmosphere. It has since delivered a treasure trove of data, revealing the birth of stars, the death of galaxies, and cosmic phenomena beyond previous imagination. But for conspiracy theorists, this very torrent of information is the perfect place to hide a secret. The core of the theory hinges on the process by which Hubble data is handled. After the telescope collects its observations, the raw, unprocessed data is not immediately beamed to the public. It goes through a proprietary period, typically lasting 1 year, where the astronomers who propose the observation have exclusive access to analyze it. This is a standard, long-standing practice in science, designed to protect the investment and intellectual contribution of the research teams who spent years designing their specific observational campaigns. For believers, however, this proprietary period is not about fairness. It's a built-in censorship mechanism. They argue it provides a convenient window during which incriminating images, those showing impossible structures or phenomena, can be identified, edited, or permanently classified before the sanitized versions are released to the public archives. The types of discoveries allegedly being hidden are as grand as they are varied. Some point to specific, deep field images where distant galaxies seem to be arranged in unnervingly perfect geometric patterns, suggesting the work of a Type 3 Kardashev civilization capable of engineering on a galactic scale. Others scrutinize star fields, claiming to spot vast, dark objects that periodically block out starlight not in a natural curve, but with a sharp, artificial-looking dimming, reminiscent of a theoretical Dyson sphere under construction. One of the most spiritually charged claims emerged in the mid-1990s, when a German magazine published a sensational story claiming that Hubble had accidentally photographed heaven itself. The article, which was later revealed to be a complete fabrication with no basis in any NASA release, described an image of a brilliant, celestial city floating in the void, a realm of light and structure that defied all astronomical explanation. Despite being a proven hoax, the story took on a life of its own, circulating for years and cementing in some minds the idea that Hubble had glimpsed the ultimate forbidden truth. The evidence put forward by proponents almost always involves the public archive itself. They download the same raw, black and white FITS files that professional astronomers use, and through their own processing adjusting contrast, enhancing colors, and applying filters, they claim to reveal details that the official, colorized press releases omit. A smudge of pixels becomes a floating city. A cluster of cosmic ray hits transforms into a fleet of ships. A lens flare artifact is interpreted as a gateway to another dimension. This practice highlights a critical divide in interpretation, where a scientist sees noise, a believer sees signal. The scientific and institutional rebuttals to these claims are rooted in the transparent yet complex nature of big science. NASA and the Space Telescope Science Institute maintain that every single image ever taken by Hubble, barring calibration frames and failed exposures, is eventually made public. The archive is immense and completely open. Anyone with an internet connection can access the same raw data as a PhD astronomer. There is no separate, classified stream of Hubble imagery. The idea of secretly editing millions of individual data files, with thousands of scientists and engineers worldwide having potential access, is logistically implausible. A discovery of the magnitude suggested, a city in space or proof of an afterlife, would be impossible to contain. Furthermore, the anomalies highlighted are consistently explained by known, if complex, instrumental, and natural phenomena. The geometric alignments of galaxies are often the result of gravitational lensing, where the gravity of a foreground cluster bends the light from more distant galaxies into arcs and rings. The strange transits that block starlight are usually attributed to dust clouds, cometary swarms, or the intrinsic variability of the stars themselves. The city lights and structures are almost universally identified as cosmic ray hits, internal reflections within the telescope's complex optics, or the unavoidable noise that comes from collecting a handful of photons across millions of light years. The story of Hubble's secret images is a powerful testament to the awe its genuine discoveries inspire. We are looking at the raw frontier of existence, and the human mind, confronted with such grandeur, naturally seeks patterns and meaning that resonate with our deepest myths and hopes. The theory flourishes in the gap between the cold, statistical data of the FITS file and the beautiful, artistically rendered image we see on a magazine cover. It suggests that the true wonder of the universe might be too overwhelming for the public to handle, and that the most profound truths are hiding not in the darkness, but in the plain data of our most powerful telescope, waiting for a lone investigator to adjust the contrast and reveal a heaven we were never meant to see. Shifting our focus from cosmic secrets to planetary catastrophe, we arrive at number 14, the theory of an ancient civilization-ending nuclear war on Mars. This is one of the most dramatic narratives in the conspiracy pantheon, suggesting that the red planet we see today, a frozen, arid desert, is not a naturally dead world, but a graveyard, the aftermath of a horrific, genocidal conflict that wiped out a sophisticated society in the distant past. Unlike theories based on grainy photographs, this one attempts to root its claims in genuine planetary science, weaving together geological data and radical reinterpretations to construct a story of cosmic tragedy. The theory's most prominent proponent is plasma physicist Dr. John Brandenburg, who has argued that the Martian surface bears the unmistakable isotopic signature of a massive thermal nuclear event. His case rests on two primary pillars of evidence. The first is the curious composition of the Martian atmosphere. Data from various orbiters has confirmed that the atmosphere of Mars contains a significantly higher concentration of the isotope xenon-129 than what is found on Earth or in the solar wind. Here on Earth, xenon-129 is a known byproduct of nuclear fission. While it can be produced naturally in supernova, its anomalous abundance on Mars, coupled with other evidence, leads Brandenburg and his supporters to conclude that it is the lingering fallout from one or more massive nuclear explosions that occurred in the planet's past. The second pillar involves the surface features themselves. Proponents point to regions like Cydonia, the same area famous for the face, and a vast glassy plain known as the Mare Acidalium. They argue that the reddish, iron oxide-rich dust that covers Mars is not uniform. In some areas, it appears thinly spread over a harder, more solidified layer beneath. This, they suggest, is a form of nuclear glass, or trinitite, a substance created when sand is fused into glass by the intense heat of a nuclear blast. The famous blueberries, small, hematite-rich spherules found by the Opportunity rover, are sometimes interpreted not as geological concretions, but as shrapnel or droplets of molten material ejected from a cataclysmic explosion. The narrative is then fleshed out with the idea that our rovers have been trundling through the ruins of this lost civilization all along. Enthusiasts scrutinize rover images, identifying what they believe are artificial debris, pieces of metal, carved stones, and even fragments of machinery and statues, all half buried in the sand. A particular rock imaged by the Curiosity rover, which appeared to have strangely fluid, almost sculpted curves, was dubbed the Mars thigh bone, with some claiming it was a fossilized remnant of the war's victims. Another image showed a slab of rock with a seemingly perfect right angle, hailed as a piece of constructed masonry. For believers, this is not random geology. It's the scattered wreckage of a world, the skeletal remains of cities and their inhabitants, silently testifying to a war that shattered a planet. The proposed cause of this conflict varies. Some suggest it was a civil war, a Martian society that turned its most powerful weapons upon itself. A more chilling hypothesis, put forward by Brandenburg himself, is that Mars was the victim of an alien attack. He proposes that two ancient humanoid civilizations, one in the Cydonia region and another in the Galaxia's Chaos area, were wiped out by a surprise nuclear strike from an unknown interstellar aggressor, a warning of the potential dangers that might await humanity in the cosmos. This transforms Mars from a mere neighbor into a grim monolith, a cautionary tale of what can happen to a world that advances too far, too fast. The mainstream scientific response to this theory is comprehensive, offering alternative explanations for every piece of evidence cited. Starting with the Xenon 129, planetary scientists point out that the Martian atmosphere has been heavily stripped away over billions of years by solar wind, due to the planet's lack of a global magnetic field. This process of atmospheric erosion is not uniform. Lighter isotopes are more easily lost to space than heavier ones. Xenon 129 is a heavier isotope, so as the atmosphere was stripped, its relative concentration would have naturally increased over time. It's a process of selective removal, not a sudden addition from a bomb. The glassy plains are explained by volcanism. Mars was once a world of immense volcanic activity, with Olympus Mons being the largest volcano in the entire solar system. The intense heat from volcanic eruptions and massive impacts from asteroids or comets could easily create vast fields of fused rock and glass without any need for nuclear weaponry. In fact, such impact glasses are found in many places on Earth, like the Libyan desert glass, and are tied to ancient non-nuclear cosmic collisions. As for the artifacts found by the rovers, the explanations return to the familiar forces of pareidolia and aeolian erosion. The thigh bone was a wind-sculpted rock, its shape eerily reminiscent of a fossil due to the same processes that create similarly shaped rocks in Earth's deserts. The perfectly angled slab was a piece of bedrock that fractured along a natural joint, a common geological occurrence. The rover's own teams, comprised of hundreds of geologists, have consistently identified these objects as rocks, their forms shaped by billions of years of wind, temperature shifts, and chemical weathering. The fundamental challenge for the nuclear war theory is the sheer scale of energy required to render a planet sterile. The nuclear arsenal of the entire Earth during the Cold War would be insufficient to cause the global devastation described. To create the effects seen on Mars, its thin atmosphere, its lack of surface water would require energies orders of magnitude greater, more akin to a planet-smashing asteroid impact than a nuclear exchange. While the idea of a lost Martian civilization is a captivating and haunting story, the scientific consensus holds that the true history of Mars is a slower, grander, and equally dramatic tale of natural planetary evolution. It is a story of a world that may have once been warm and wet, with flowing rivers and vast oceans, but which lost its magnetic field, saw its atmosphere slowly stripped away, and its water either frozen underground or lost to space. The red planet stands not as a monument to war, but as a sobering lesson in planetary climatology, a vision of a potentially habitable world that could not sustain its own promise. Yet, the theory's power endures because it speaks to a deep, almost primordial fear of self-annihilation. It projects our own terrestrial anxieties about nuclear winter onto the rusty landscape next door, making Mars a cosmic mirror for our darkest potential future. It is a story that transforms a dead world into a tombstone, a silent warning written across an entire planet, reminding us that the greatest mysteries in space may not be about what is out there, but about what we ourselves are capable of becoming. Sometimes, the most compelling mysteries are born not from what we see, but from what our equations insist must be there. This brings us to number 15, a tale that begins not with a grainy photograph, but with the elegant, unyielding laws of physics themselves. We're exploring the long and fascinating history of the hunt for the planet Vulcan, a world that, for decades, was believed to orbit the Sun inside the path of Mercury, and whose spectral presence reveals how even the greatest scientific minds can be led on a wild goose chase by a beautiful yet flawed idea. The story starts in the mid-19th century with the pinnacle of Newtonian physics. Urbain Le Verrier, a brilliant French mathematician who had famously predicted the existence and position of Neptune by analyzing gravitational tugs on Uranus, turned his attention to a new puzzle, the orbit of Mercury. Mercury, the solar system's innermost planet, has a peculiarity. The point in its orbit where it comes closest to the Sun, its perihelion, slowly shifts over time. This precession is mostly explained by the gravitational pull of the other planets, but there was a tiny, stubborn discrepancy left over, an extra 43 arcseconds of precession per century that Newton's laws could not account for. For Le Verrier, this was a familiar problem with a familiar solution. Just as an unseen Neptune was tugging on Uranus, he proposed that an unseen planet, or perhaps a band of small asteroids, was orbiting inside Mercury's path and gravitationally perturbing its motion. He calculated its probable mass and orbit, and in 1859, he named this hypothetical world Vulcan, after the Roman god of fire. The announcement sent a wave of excitement through the astronomical community. The hunt was on. Almost immediately, reports of sightings began to filter in. An amateur astronomer named Edmond Modest Lescarbault claimed to have seen a small, dark dot transiting the Sun, a new planet. Le Verrier personally visited Lescarbault, verified his credentials and notes, and declared the discovery confirmed. Other observers soon reported their own sightings of Vulcan, both as a transit and as a faint point of light near the Sun during total solar eclipses, when the Moon's shadow made such observations possible. For a time, Vulcan was considered a real, if elusive, member of our solar system. It was even included in some textbooks and celestial maps, but a problem quickly emerged. The observations were maddeningly inconsistent. Different astronomers reported Vulcan in different positions. Some saw it during eclipses, while others, looking at the same event, saw nothing at all. The transits reported never matched the predictions. The evidence was a patchwork of contradictory anecdotes, and as decades passed without a single, definitive, repeatable observation, the astronomical community grew increasingly skeptical. The ghost of Vulcan was finally laid to rest in the early 20th century, not by a better telescope, but by a revolutionary new theory of gravity itself. When Albert Einstein developed his general theory of relativity, he used the mystery of Mercury's orbit as a key test. In Einstein's model, gravity is not a force acting at a distance. as Newton described, but a curvature of spacetime caused by mass. The Sun's immense mass warps the space around it, and Mercury, moving so close to this curvature, follows a slightly different path. When Einstein performed the calculations, the result was a perfect match. General relativity precisely accounted for those pesky 43 arcseconds of precession without the need for any hidden planets. Vulcan was not a world, but a phantom, a mathematical artifact of an incomplete theory. With that, the scientific case for Vulcan was officially closed. Yet, as with so many of these stories, the idea refused to die. It simply evolved and found a new home in the realm of conspiracy and fringe science. The modern iteration of the Vulcan theory has shed its Newtonian origins and taken on a far more speculative character. Some now suggest that while the original Vulcan may not exist, a different kind of hidden world could still dwell in the searing heat of the inner solar system. This new Vulcan is not invoked to explain orbital mechanics, but is instead imagined as a technologically advanced observation post. Proponents point to the unique advantages of such an orbit. A planet or a large, cloaked station positioned between the Sun and Mercury would be perpetually hidden in the Sun's blinding glare, making it virtually undetectable by Earth-based telescopes. It would be the perfect place for an advanced extraterrestrial civilization to establish a permanent monitoring base, studying humanity from a vantage point of ultimate concealment. This theory is often bolstered by claims of strange objects spotted in satellite imagery from solar observatories like SOHO and STEREO. Some point to fleeting, fast-moving dots that seem to emerge from behind the Sun, suggesting craft traveling to and from a hidden home base. These anomalies, as we've discussed with similar solar UFO claims, are almost universally explained by scientists as compression artifacts, cosmic rays striking the camera sensors, or outgassed debris from the spacecraft themselves. But for believers, they are the fleeting glimpses of the traffic to and from Vulcan. The theory represents a fascinating evolution of a scientific mystery into a cultural myth. It demonstrates how a void in our knowledge, once filled by a scientific hypothesis, can, when that hypothesis is disproven, be refilled by the human imagination with something even more wondrous and strange. The original search for Vulcan was a testament to the power of Newtonian physics. Its failure paved the way for the triumph of Einsteinian relativity. And its persistence in modern conspiracy lore is a testament to our enduring fascination with the idea that the most important discoveries are not the ones we have made, but the ones that remain hidden just out of sight, in the most obvious and yet most inaccessible places. It suggests that the final frontier of our own solar system might still hold profound secrets, not because our physics is wrong, but because someone or something might be deliberately hiding in the light. But as we contemplate hidden planets and lost wars, our attention is inevitably drawn closer to home, to the increasingly crowded orbital highways circling our own world. This brings us to conspiracy theory number 16, a modern legend born from the very real yet often opaque world of military space operations. The theory of a space fence and a fleet of secret satellites whose purposes extend far beyond simple reconnaissance into the realms of global surveillance, mind control, and even weather manipulation. Unlike tales of ancient Martian conflicts, this narrative is rooted in the observable present, fueled by the tangible reality that thousands of objects are whizzing over our heads every day, many of whose true functions are classified. The term space fence itself has a legitimate public origin. It was the nickname for the U.S. Air Force Space Surveillance System, a network of ground-based radars that tracked orbital debris and satellites. More recently, it has been replaced by a new, more advanced system, officially known as the Space Fence, operated by the Space Force, designed to track a vastly greater number of smaller objects to prevent catastrophic collisions in orbit. For believers in the conspiracy, however, this public-facing explanation is merely a cover story. They propose that the real Space Fence is not a tracking system, but the network of secret satellites themselves, a clandestine web of advanced platforms performing tasks that would be considered unethical or tyrannical if revealed to the public. The theories surrounding their purpose are as varied as they are alarming. One of the most persistent claims is that these satellites are instruments of mass mind control. Proponents point to the existence of proven technologies like the Voice of God weapon, which can project a narrow beam of sound, making a person hear voices in their head as if they were their own thoughts. They speculate that this technology, scaled up and deployed from orbit, could be used to subtly influence the moods, beliefs, and even the political inclinations of entire populations, creating a docile and compliant citizenry. This idea often ties into older conspiracy theories about HAARP, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, with some suggesting that these satellites work in tandem with ground-based ionospheric heaters to create a global network for behavioral modification. Another widespread belief centers on weather warfare. The idea that governments can weaponize the weather is a chilling one, and secret satellites are often cast as the delivery mechanism. Theorists point to increasingly erratic and severe weather patterns, unprecedented hurricanes, devastating droughts, and freak snowstorms, and argue these are not purely natural phenomena. They suggest that energy-directing satellites could be used to steer storms, induce earthquakes, or trigger droughts as a form of economic or military coercion against rival nations, all while maintaining plausible deniability. The evidence put forward for these extraordinary claims is largely circumstantial, but in the digital age, it has found a powerful engine: the global community of amateur satellite trackers. Enthusiasts around the world use publicly available data from sources like SpaceTrack.org, provided by the U.S. military, to monitor the orbits of thousands of objects. It is within this vast catalog that they find their most compelling clues. They point to satellites listed simply as Object Unknown or with cryptic, classified designations like USA number, followed by a string of digits. The peculiar orbital patterns of some of these objects are dissected in online forums. A satellite that makes repeated passes over specific global population centers, or one that sits in an unusual geosynchronous orbit, is immediately suspected of being a surveillance platform far more advanced than anything acknowledged. The mysterious Zuma satellite, launched in 2018 amid a media blackout and rumors of a catastrophic failure, is often cited as a prime example of the secrecy involved. Even more fuel is added by the occasional, unexplained streak of light seen in the night sky. While most are quickly identified as rocket debris, satellite flares, or meteors, some displays, like the remarkable spiral seen over Norway in 2009, defy immediate explanation and are quickly absorbed into the narrative as potential tests of secret propulsion systems or exotic weapons. The official stance from governments and the aerospace industry is one of necessary secrecy for national security. They acknowledge that classified satellites exist, but their purpose, they insist, is conventional: advanced signals intelligence, early warning for missile launches, and secure communications for military operations. The idea of whether control or mind beaming weapons is dismissed as science fiction, far beyond our current technological capabilities and violating known laws of physics when envisioned on a global scale. Scientists explain that the energy required to meaningfully alter a hurricane's path or power a mind-influencing signal that could penetrate buildings and individual skulls from thousands of miles in orbit is astronomically, impossibly high. The real story of the space fence may be less about sinister control and more about the new, fragile ecosystem we have created in low Earth orbit. We have surrounded our planet with a shell of technology, much of it dual use with both civilian and military application. The line between a satellite that can image a license plate and one that could theoretically be used for targeting is razor thin. This ambiguity is the fertile ground where conspiracy theories grow. The public is aware that powerful capabilities exist in space, but the details are locked away behind classification walls. In that informational void, speculation flourishes, transforming anonymous catalog numbers and unusual orbits into a narrative of omnipresent orbital control. It is a theory for a hyper-connected, surveillance-aware age, reflecting our growing unease with the fact that the same technologies that give us GPS and global communication also have the potential to create a panopticon on a planetary scale. The secret satellite theory endures because it projects our terrestrial fears of government overreach and loss of privacy onto the ultimate high ground, creating a celestial manifestation of the big brother we fear is already watching from right here on Earth. While the official Apollo program concluded with the 17th mission, a shadowy and remarkably detailed story emerged from the digital underworld in the early 2000s, claiming that the adventure was far from over. At number 17, we dive into the intricate and bizarre legend of Apollo 20, a complete fabrication that wove together crashed alien motherships, ancient astronauts, and even a mysterious extraterrestrial pilot found preserved in eternal slumber. This wasn't just a written story. It was a full-blown multimedia hoax, presented through a series of grainy black and white videos uploaded to the then nascent video platform YouTube by a user named Retired Of. The videos purported to be leaked footage from a top-secret joint American-Soviet mission that flew in the mid-1970s, long after the public program had been canceled. The narrative was captivatingly specific. According to the uploader, Apollo 20's objective was to investigate a colossal, cigar-shaped object discovered on the far side of the moon by the Apollo 15 crew. This wasn't a small anomaly. It was a miles-long alien spacecraft, supposedly lying derelict in the crater Isaac D, a silent relic from a war or a catastrophe that occurred untold eons ago. The grainy footage showed the Apollo lunar module descending towards a stark, cratered landscape, eventually revealing the impossibly large, geometric shape of the craft, partially buried in lunar soil and pockmarked by the impacts of billions of years. The story then took an even more incredible turn. The astronauts, portrayed in the video, allegedly entered the giant spacecraft and explored its cavernous interior. They described finding alien hieroglyphics and strange crystalline technology. But the most stunning discovery was in the command section: 2 humanoid bodies. One was described as being in a deteriorated state, but the other was perfectly preserved, a being that appeared female, whom the astronauts nicknamed Mona Lisa. The videos claimed she was a pilot, found still connected to her chair in a state of suspended animation, and that she was not just alien, but also strikingly human-like, prompting wild speculation about our own origins. The hoax was surprisingly sophisticated for its time, leveraging the low-resolution, high-contrast aesthetic of genuine Apollo mission film to create an air of authenticity. The creator, who later revealed himself as an Italian artist and filmmaker named Luca Scantamburlo, had a keen understanding of what makes a conspiracy compelling. He blended real lunar geography with his fabricated models and effects, using the names of real NASA astronauts like William Rutledge and Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonov to lend credibility. He even created a detailed backstory, explaining that the mission was kept secret to prevent worldwide panic and to allow a covert group to study the recovered technology in peace. For a brief period, the Apollo 20 story captivated the online UFO community. It had all the ingredients of a classic conspiracy: government secrecy, suppressed technology, and the ultimate proof of extraterrestrial life, all delivered in a format that mimicked the official archival footage people were familiar with. It tapped directly into the public's fascination with what might be hidden on the moon's far side, a place we still cannot see from Earth, making it the perfect canvas for a story of hidden wonders. The digital unraveling of the hoax, however, was as fascinating as the story itself. As more people scrutinized the footage, the digital seams began to show. Visual effects experts and space enthusiasts pointed out numerous inconsistencies. The lighting on the model of the alien spacecraft didn't always match the harsh, directional sunlight of the lunar surface. The physics of the lunar module's movement in some clips seemed off, lacking the subtle bounces and precise maneuvers characteristic of the 1/6 gravity on the moon. Perhaps the most telling clue was found within the video's metadata and the creator's own artistic history. The leaked footage was eventually traced to a French documentary about the Apollo program. The hoaxer had simply edited his own models and narratives over the existing, authentic footage. Furthermore, the fictional lunar woman, Mona Lisa, was identified as a modified prop from a separate, low-budget science fiction film. Her face digitally altered and placed into the fake cockpit scene. The entire production was a masterclass in digital pastiche, a remix of real and fictional elements designed to exploit our desire for a grander, more exciting hidden history. The creator himself eventually admitted it was an artistic project, a piece of science fiction designed to provoke discussion and explore these themes, not to perpetrate a malicious fraud. The legacy of the Apollo 20 hoax is a powerful lesson in the digital age. It demonstrated how easily a compelling narrative, when paired with seemingly authentic visuals, could capture the imagination of millions before the truth could catch up. It predated the modern era of deepfakes, but foreshadowed its potential. The hoax didn't just fool the gullible, it appealed to a universal sense of wonder, presenting a story so epic and so perfectly tailored to existing conspiracy tropes that many wanted it to be true. It stands as a monument to our collective yearning for the cosmos to be not just empty and silent, but filled with the ruins of ancient empires and the sleeping witnesses to a grander galactic story, even if we have to invent them ourselves. Of all the strange visitors to our cosmic neighborhood, none have sparked as much intense and public debate as the one that arrived without warning in the fall of 2017. We now reach number 18 on our list, a theory that catapulted a mysterious interstellar object from a minor astronomical headline to a global sensation. The claim that Oumuamua was not a comet or an asteroid, but a piece of advanced alien technology. This wasn't a story born from anonymous internet forums, but from the mind of a renowned Harvard astronomer, a fact that gave the idea a credibility and media firepower unlike any celestial mystery before it. The object was first spotted by the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii, and its name, Oumuamua, fittingly means scout or messenger from afar arriving first in Hawaiian. Right from the start, it was clear this was something extraordinary. Its trajectory was hyperbolic, meaning it was moving far too fast to be captured by the sun's gravity. It was our first confirmed visitor from another star system, a piece of galactic flotsam that had been traveling between the stars for millions, perhaps billions, of years before it briefly intersected with our own. As telescopes around the world swiveled to observe it, the peculiarities began to mount. The first and most baffling characteristic was its shape. Based on how its brightness changed dramatically as it tumbled through space, astronomers calculated that Oumuamua was highly elongated, perhaps 10 times as long as it was wide. Imagine a cosmic cigar or a pancake tumbling end over end. This was unlike any asteroid or comet we had ever seen in our own solar system, where objects tend to be far more rounded. Then there was the mystery of its acceleration. As Oumuamua sped away from the sun, astronomers tracking its path noticed something they could not immediately explain. Its trajectory was deviating slightly from the path predicted by gravity alone. It was accelerating just a tiny bit, but enough to be statistically significant. For a comet, this is normal behavior. As the sun heats icy compounds on its surface, they vaporize and jet out into space, acting like a natural rocket engine and giving the comet a push. This is what creates a comet's beautiful flowing tail. But here was the final, and perhaps most critical, piece of the puzzle. Oumuamua showed no visible signs of outgassing. Despite intense scrutiny, not a single telescope could detect a coma, the fuzzy envelope of gas and dust, or a tail. It was, to all appearances, a barren, rocky object, yet it was accelerating as if it were an active comet. This paradox is where the scientific mystery transformed into a full-blown space conspiracy, championed most prominently by Professor Avi Loeb. Loeb, the former chair of Harvard's astronomy department, proposed a radical solution. What if the acceleration wasn't caused by invisible outgassing? What if it was caused by radiation pressure from the sun itself? For a naturally occurring object to be pushed significantly by sunlight, it would need to be incredibly thin and lightweight, like a sail. Loeb and his colleague concluded that Oumuamua's behavior was consistent with it being a light sail, a form of propulsion for interstellar probes, an idea humanity is already developing with projects like Breakthrough Starshot. In this interpretation, Oumuamua was not a random piece of rock. It was a derelict piece of alien technology, perhaps a discarded light sail from a larger vessel or a defunct probe sent on a mission of reconnaissance millions of years ago. Its unusual shape, its lack of a visible coma, and its non-gravitational acceleration all pointed, in Loeb's view, to an artificial origin. He argued that the most conservative approach was not to assume it was a natural object of a type we had never seen before, but to seriously consider the possibility that it was exactly what it appeared to be, a piece of extraterrestrial machinery. The mainstream astronomical community, while fascinated by the object's strangeness, has largely pushed back against this extraordinary claim. Their counter-argument hinges on the principle of Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. They propose that Oumuamua was a natural interstellar object, but one made of materials or with characteristics we simply haven't encountered up close. One prominent theory suggests it could have been a fractal-like aggregate of dust, a so-called dust bunny with an extremely low density that would make it responsive to radiation pressure without needing to emit detectable gas. Another posits that it was a chunk of solid hydrogen ice. A hydrogen iceberg would sublimate under the sun's heat, providing the thrust for the observed acceleration, but the hydrogen gas released would be completely invisible to our telescopes. A third, and perhaps the leading, theory is that Oumuamua was, in fact, a comet, but an unusual one. It's possible that its outgassing was composed of pure water vapor or other molecules that are difficult to detect from our vantage point, and that the dust it released was composed of unusually large grains that didn't scatter light in a way that created a visible tail. The debate ultimately highlights a fundamental schism in how we approach the unknown. On one side is a perspective that urges bold consideration of all possibilities, including the most thrilling. On the other is a methodology that prioritizes natural explanations, building slowly from known physics and chemistry. The Oumuamua incident forced this philosophical divide into the public spotlight like never before. Critics of the alien probe hypothesis argue that invoking extraterrestrial intelligence should be a last resort, not a first guess, and that labeling such a unique object as alien potentially stifles the search for more nuanced, natural explanations. Proponents counter that this very conservatism is a form of scientific blindness, an unwillingness to acknowledge evidence that could point to a revolutionary truth. The legacy of Oumuamua is not that it provided an answer, but that it framed a critical question for our time. As we get better at finding interstellar objects, how will we know if and when we have found one that is not natural? It has already changed astronomy. Plans are underway for new telescopes, like the Vera C. Rubin Observatory, that will actively scan the skies for more of these visitors. The next time an interstellar object drifts into our view, we will be better prepared, with more tools and a more heated debate ready and waiting. Oumuamua, the silent, tumbling scout, may not have been an alien probe, but it succeeded in one profound way. It delivered a message not from the stars, but from the future of exploration itself, a message that the universe is undoubtedly stranger than we think, and that we must be prepared intellectually and emotionally for the day when its strangeness might just be the product of a mind other than our own. But what if the Apollo missions and our public space agencies are merely a front? A carefully staged, managed performance designed to distract us from a far more profound and secret reality. This brings us to conspiracy theory number 19, a sprawling and intricate narrative that suggests a select group of humanity has already achieved a technological revolution so profound that they have effectively seceded from the rest of us. This is the theory of the secret space program and the breakaway civilization, a concept that posits a cabal of global elites, in collaboration with shadowy government factions and corporate entities, has been operating a fleet of advanced spacecraft for decades, establishing colonies off-world, and engaging in interstellar diplomacy, all while the public remains transfixed by the relative primitive spectacle of chemical rockets and rovers. The foundational idea here is that technologies like anti-gravity propulsion and zero-point energy were discovered long ago, arguably back engineered from recovered extraterrestrial vehicles, but have been deliberately suppressed from public release to maintain the existing energy and economic paradigms that grant this group its power. This isn't just about hiding a new engine. It's about controlling the very trajectory of human civilization, ensuring that this breakaway group maintains its god-like technological advantage. The alleged evidence for this mind-bending scenario comes from a chorus of supposed insiders, whose testimonies, while unverifiable through conventional channels, have created a dense and self-reinforcing mythology. One of the most prominent figures is a man named Bob Lazar, who in the late 1980s came forward claiming to have worked at a secret facility called S4 near the infamous Area 51. Lazar described in technical detail his work on 9 alien disc-shaped craft, asserting that their propulsion system used an unstable element, number 115, to generate gravitational waves that could warp spacetime. While mainstream science has never corroborated his claims about element 115's properties, and his educational background has been hotly disputed, his story became a cornerstone for the belief in a hidden reverse engineering program. His descriptions of the craft's performance, their ability to reorient instantly and defy conventional physics, perfectly align with the capabilities one would expect from a secret space fleet. The narrative expands dramatically with the alleged testimony of a whistleblower using the pseudonym Corey Good, who claims to have served in what he calls the Solar Warden program. Good's accounts, delivered through a series of interviews and written statements, describe a vast military-style operation with multiple classes of triangular and cigar-shaped motherships, personnel rotations to bases on Mars, and even encounters with a bewildering variety of non-human intelligences, some benevolent and others predatory. He speaks of a 20-and-back program, where individuals are recruited for 20-year terms of service in this secret program, after which their memories are partially wiped and they are age regressed and return to their normal lives. These stories, fantastic as they sound, are bolstered in the minds of believers by a trail of curious documents and public statements. A declassified 1959 U.S. Air Force document briefly mentioned a project called Solar Warden in the context of satellite surveillance, though its context was entirely different. More provocatively, in 2010, a hacker group released emails from a defense and aerospace contractor that seemed to reference SOP, or Standard Operating Procedure, for dealing with non-terrestrial officers, a phrase that sent shockwaves through the conspiracy community. While skeptics argue this could easily refer to officers dealing with satellite or drone operations, believers see it as a blatant admission of a classified military structure for off-world engagements. The proposed locations for this breakaway civilization's infrastructure are as specific as they are remote. Beyond the lunar far side, Mars is often described as a key hub. Alleged insiders have spoken of vast, pressurized underground facilities buried deep beneath the Martian surface, protecting inhabitants from radiation and temperature extremes. These are not simple outposts, but sprawling, self-sufficient cities, complete with biospheres for food production and manufacturing centers producing technologies we on Earth would consider magical. The existence of such bases is often tied to the mysterious plumes and transient methane readings detected by our orbiters, which are interpreted not as geological phenomena, but as the exhaust and waste products of a thriving, hidden industrial colony. So why go to such unimaginable lengths to conceal this? The proposed motives are as far-reaching as the theory itself. For some, it is the ultimate expression of wealth and power consolidation. By controlling technologies that could provide free, limitless energy and open the solar system to easy travel, this breakaway group ensures its total dominance, effectively making the rest of humanity a dependent and controlled population. For others, the secrecy is a matter of planetary security, a necessary precaution to prevent global societal collapse upon the revelation that we are not alone and that a technological quantum leap has already occurred. There is also a darker, more esoteric angle that suggests this group is engaged in a form of cosmic barter, trading human genetic material or other planetary resources with certain alien species in exchange for technology. A chilling concept that casts humanity as a commodity in a galactic marketplace. The scientific and logical rebuttals to this theory are, as one would expect, substantial. The sheer scale of such an operation, the thousands of personnel, the decades of manufacturing, the energy requirements for interstellar travel, would create an industrial and logistical footprint that seems impossible to hide completely. Our most powerful telescopes can map the surfaces of other worlds in astonishing detail. And while we see fascinating geology, we see no evidence of cities, spaceports, or the massive energy signatures such activities would presumably generate. Furthermore, the physics of anti-gravity and faster-than-light travel, as described by whistleblowers, remains firmly in the realm of theoretical speculation, with no reproducible evidence in the public domain. From a sociological perspective, the secret space program theory represents the ultimate convergence of nearly every major conspiracy trope into a single, grand, unified narrative of control. It merges UFO lore with fears of a new world order, ancient astronaut theories with suspicions of suppressed technology. It thrives in the absolute, unfalsifiable space of total secrecy. Any lack of evidence is simply proof of how effective the cover-up is. The story's power lies in its ability to explain a world full of inequality and technological stagnation, not as a result of complex, mundane challenges, but as the deliberate design of a malicious, hidden hand. It transforms the cosmos from a place of empty wonder into a populated, dangerous, and politically charged frontier, where a secret war for the soul of humanity is already being waged, far above our heads and just beyond the edge of our perception. Now, imagine holding in your hands a single artifact, a skull, that some believe could rewrite the entire history of our species. This brings us to number 20, the enigmatic story of the Starchild skull, a physical object that has become a central piece of evidence for those who argue that alien beings have been interacting with, and even interbreeding with, humanity for centuries. The story begins not in a laboratory, but in a cave. Around the 1930s, a teenage girl in Mexico was said to have discovered a bizarre skeleton buried in a mine tunnel. She took the bones, and decades later, they came into the possession of a couple in the United States, who were immediately struck by the strange appearance of one of the skulls. It was unusually small, with a highly domed cranium, and its bone was thin and almost papery in places. But the most striking features were its eye sockets. They were shallow, with optic canals that were positioned lower than in a typical human skull. To the owners, and later to a growing community of believers, this was not the skull of a human being with a medical condition. This was something else entirely, a hybrid. The theory, popularized by its proponents, is that the Starchild skull represents the offspring of a human and an extraterrestrial being. They argue that its unique morphology, the shape, size, and structure of the bone, is simply too far outside the range of any known human deformity or pathology. The skull's volume, while small, is said to be larger than it appears for its size, suggesting a potentially advanced brain. The lack of frontal sinuses, the symmetry of the face, and the alleged extraordinary strength of the bone, despite its thinness, are all presented as hallmarks of a separate, non-human lineage. For believers, this isn't just an oddity. It's a fossilized snapshot of an interstellar relationship, tangible proof that the ancient astronaut theories we discussed earlier might have a literal biological foundation. The controversy truly ignited when modern science was brought to bear on the mystery. In the 2000s, a series of genetic analyses were performed on the skull. The initial results were both shocking and, for proponents, seemingly confirmatory. Early DNA testing reported that a significant portion of the skull's mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited from the mother, was indeed human. However, researchers working with the skull's owners claimed that they could not recover the nuclear DNA from the father. They reported that the DNA was highly degraded and that the paternal parts they could sequence did not match any known human DNA. This was heralded as the smoking gun. The father, they concluded, was not human. The story was perfect for the media: a human mother and an alien father, their child's skull preserved as evidence. This narrative taps into a deep and ancient human fascination with hybrids, from the demigods of Greek mythology to the half-human, half-alien characters of modern science fiction. It suggests that our history is not a solitary climb from primitivism, but a story intertwined with other, more advanced species, and that their genetic legacy might still be walking among us today. The scientific and skeptical response, however, has been methodical and, in the view of the mainstream scientific community, definitive. Leading geneticists and paleopathologists who have examined the data argue that the failure to recover nuclear DNA is not evidence of an alien father, but rather a testament to the skull's age and the poor preservation of DNA over centuries. They point out that recovering ancient DNA is notoriously difficult, and contamination or degradation can easily lead to inconclusive or erroneous results. More critically, a subsequent, more rigorous genetic analysis was undertaken and published in the journal Genes in 2018. This study successfully sequenced the skull's entire mitochondrial genome and a significant portion of its nuclear DNA. The conclusions were stark. The star-child skull belonged to a human child, a young boy, who lived approximately 500 years ago. The mitochondrial DNA pointed to Native American ancestry, specifically from the American continent. But the most crucial finding was in the nuclear DNA. The analysis revealed that the boy suffered from a rare but well-documented congenital birth defect known as hydrocephalus. This condition involves a buildup of cerebrospinal fluid in the brain's ventricles, which puts immense pressure on the developing skull bones. In a young infant whose cranial bones have not yet fused, this pressure causes the head to swell dramatically, resulting in the enlarged, domed cranium and the thinning of the bone that characterizes the star-child skull. The unusual shape of the eye sockets and other facial features are also consistent with the skeletal distortions caused by severe hydrocephalus. From this scientific perspective, the mystery is solved. The star-child skull is a tragic medical specimen, a poignant reminder of the harsh realities of life and health in a pre-modern era. It tells a story not of alien visitors, but of a short, difficult life of a Native American child whose condition would have been incomprehensible to his people. The debate, however, has not ended. Proponents of the alien hybridization theory have pushed back against the hydrocephalus diagnosis. They argue that the skull lacks certain key markers of the condition, such as a disproportionately large forehead or evidence of cranial sutures being forced widely apart. They maintain that the bone's reported toughness is inconsistent with the brittle bones often associated with severe hydrocephalus, and they question the completeness of the genetic data, suggesting that the samples may have been contaminated or that the true non-human sequences remain elusive. This back and forth highlights a fundamental tension in how we interpret anomalies. For the mainstream scientist, the star-child skull fits neatly into a known category of human pathology. It is a sad but understandable example of a natural disease process. For the believer, it is an outlier that challenges the entire paradigm, an object that doesn't fit and therefore must point to a more extraordinary truth. The skull's power lies in its physicality. Unlike a grainy photograph or a disputed audio recording, you can hold it, measure it, and analyze it. It is a real, tangible object that defies our initial expectations of what a human skull should look like. This forces us to confront the limits of our own knowledge and the powerful human tendency to seek extraordinary explanations for things we do not immediately understand. In the end, the Starchild skull serves as a powerful Rorschach test. What you see in its unusual contours often says more about your own beliefs and your trust in institutional science than it does about the object itself. It is either a heartbreaking medical specimen or the most important archaeological find in human history, a single, silent bone that contains two completely different stories of who we are and where we come from. Of all the signals ever captured by our ears aimed at the cosmos, none is more famous or more frustrating than the one that arrived on a quiet Ohio evening and was gone just as quickly as it appeared. We now reach number 21 on our list, a story that revolves around a single, powerful burst of data and the enduring belief that its incredible potential was deliberately downplayed. This is the conspiracy surrounding the WOW signal, a 72-second radio transmission detected in 1977 that many believe was our first and best confirmed message from an extraterrestrial intelligence. A message that was subsequently explained away by a scientific establishment unwilling to accept the staggering implications. The event itself reads like a scene from a movie. On August 15th of that year, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University was methodically scanning the sky as part of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI program. The data was printed out on long, continuous sheets of paper, and days later, a volunteer named Jerry Amon was reviewing the alphanumeric readout. His eyes fell on a sequence of characters that made him stop cold. The signal was so intense that he circled it in red pen and, in the margin, wrote a single, powerful word, WOW. The alphanumeric code, 6EQJ5, indicated a signal that was both narrowband and strong, hitting a frequency very close to the famous 21-centimeter hydrogen line, a wavelength that scientists had long speculated would be a logical choice for interstellar communication because it's a quiet, natural channel in the radio spectrum. It came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, and for its brief duration, it was over 30 times stronger than the background noise of space. Crucially, it exhibited the hallmark of a potential extraterrestrial origin. It was not continuous, because the Big Ear telescope used two feed horns that scanned the same point in the sky a few minutes apart. A signal from a fixed point in space should have appeared in both horns. The WOW signal was detected in only one. This was exactly what astronomers would expect from a distant, non-repeating celestial source. It would pass through the telescope's fixed field of view and be gone. For those who believed the signal was a genuine attempt at contact, this was the smoking gun. It was brief, targeted, and intelligent in its design, a perfect candidate for a cosmic hello. The conspiracy theory that grew from this event suggests that the mainstream scientific community, rather than heralding this as a monumental discovery, engaged in a campaign of quiet suppression. The core accusation is that after an initial flurry of excitement, observatories and researchers deliberately avoided serious, dedicated follow-up observations of that specific region of space. Over the decades, numerous attempts were made to find the signal again, using more powerful and sensitive equipment, but every single one came up empty. For believers, This failure to replicate isn't proof that the signal was a fluke. It's evidence of a coordinated lack of will. They argue that the possibility was so paradigm-shattering that it was safer to relegate the wow signal to the status of an unsolved curiosity rather than risk the professional and public upheaval that would follow a confirmed detection. The proposed motive is a deep-seated institutional conservatism, a fear of being associated with the giggle factor that often plagued early SETI research. Announcing first contact based on a fleeting, unverified signal was seen as a career-ending move. And so, the theory goes, the scientific establishment collectively decided to let the wow signal fade into legend rather than invest the immense resources needed to solve the mystery once and for all. The official scientific explanations for the signal, while varied, all point toward natural, if unusual, phenomena. One of the most persistent hypotheses involves comets. In 2016, an astronomer proposed that the signal could have been caused by the hydrogen clouds surrounding two comets, known as 266P/Christensen and 335P/Gibbs, which were in the same area of the sky at the time and were unknown in 1977. As comets approach the Sun, they release vast clouds of hydrogen gas, which could theoretically emit a strong, narrowband signal at the 21-centimeter line. However, this theory has been heavily criticized. Skeptics point out that the comets were not actually in the precise beam of the Big Ear telescope at that moment, and that cometary hydrogen clouds are generally considered far too diffuse to produce a signal as powerful and focused as the wow signal was. Another leading explanation points the finger back at our own planet. The signal could have been a reflection, a piece of human-made space debris, perhaps a discarded rocket booster or a secret military satellite, tumbling in orbit, could have reflected a terrestrial radio transmission back down to the Big Ear telescope. The signal's characteristics would match if the reflection was brief and the geometry was just right. This would explain why it was never detected again. The specific alignment of the object, the Earth, and the telescope was a 1 in a billion event. Yet, no definitive candidate for such a reflector has ever been identified. There's also the possibility of a more exotic natural event. Some astrophysicists have suggested it could have been an incredibly powerful and rare form of stellar flare, or an unknown type of interstellar scintillation, where the radio waves from a distant quasar or star were amplified and focused by an intervening cloud of plasma, creating a brief, bright spike in a single location. The fundamental challenge, and the reason the wow signal remains so iconic, is its perfect ambiguity. It was everything we were looking for, but it left just enough room for doubt. It was a signal that perfectly matched the predicted profile of an interstellar beacon, yet it was never heard again, which is precisely what you would expect from a civilization that wasn't continuously broadcasting in our direction. The conspiracy theory thrives in this gap between a perfect candidate and the lack of definitive proof. It suggests that the most important moment in human history may have already happened, and that we, as a species, chose to look the other way, filing it away as an unexplained anomaly because the truth was simply too large, too disruptive, and too humbling to confront. The wow signal endures not as a solved case, but as a ghost in the machine of science, a 72-second whisper from the void that continues to ask us the most profound question of all. If we finally heard a voice in the cosmic silence, would we really have the courage to answer? This brings us to a celestial mystery that thrives in permanent shadow, both literally and figuratively. At number 22 on our list, we're journeying to the one place in our cosmic neighborhood we can never see from Earth, the far side of the moon, and exploring the compelling myth that this hidden hemisphere serves as a base of operations for extraterrestrial observers. Imagine a vast, silent landscape, perpetually turned away from the cacophony of humanity, a place of eternal radio silence where secrets could be kept for millennia. This idea is so powerful because it leverages a simple, undeniable fact of celestial mechanics. Due to tidal locking, one face of the moon is forever hidden from our view. It is the ultimate blind spot, and human imagination has been quick to fill that void with stories of ancient outposts and silent watchers. The theory didn't emerge from a vacuum. It was fueled by genuine, documented oddities witnessed by professional astronomers for centuries. These events are known as lunar transient phenomena, or LTPS, and they include fleeting flashes of light, strange colored glows, and areas of the lunar surface that appear to temporarily fog over or change in obscurity. For example, in the 1960s, astronomers at the Lowell Observatory and others reported observing bright, pinpoint flashes and diffuse, reddish hazes within the crater Aristarchus, one of the most geologically active sites on the moon. To the casual observer, these brief, unexplained events sound exactly like the kind of activity you might expect from a facility turning on powerful lights, opening a massive airlock, or engaging in industrial operations. Proponents of the alien base theory argue that these LTPS are not random geological quirks, but the observable side effects of a bustling, hidden civilization going about its business just next door, with their activities occasionally and accidentally spilling into our line of sight. The photographic evidence put forward is often drawn from the archives of lunar orbiters like NASA Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Conspiracy investigators meticulously scan these high-resolution images, pointing to what they identify as impossible geometries. They highlight structures that appear to be towering spires, casting long, sharp shadows that seem too straight and narrow to be natural rock formations. They point to clusters of what look like massive, domed roofs, perfect for pressurizing a habitat, and strange, rectilinear arrangements of what they call ruins on the floors of certain craters. One of the most famous examples is the so-called Shard or Tower of the Moon, an anomalous feature photographed by the Lunar Orbiter program that appears to be an impossibly tall, thin spire rising high above the surrounding terrain. To believers, these are not tricks of the light. They are the architectural footprints of a sprawling lunar complex, the kind of infrastructure a monitoring species would need to maintain a permanent presence. The proposed motivations for such a base are as varied as they are fascinating. One school of thought suggests it's a simple observation post. An alien species interested in studying the development of a technologically emergent civilization like ours would find the far side of the moon an ideal, discrete location. It offers an unparalleled vantage point to monitor our broadcasts, our wars, our cultural development, and our first tentative steps into space, all while remaining completely concealed. Another, more unsettling hypothesis is that the base serves a protective or custodial function. Perhaps it's a quarantine station, ensuring that a volatile species like humanity doesn't venture too far into the galaxy before we've reached a certain level of maturity or peace. Or maybe it's a library, a secure repository for all of Earth's biological and historical data, a backup of our entire world preserved in case we should succumb to one of our many self-inflicted catastrophes. This ties the theory directly into the concept of a zoo hypothesis for why we haven't been openly contacted. From a scientific and skeptical standpoint, the explanations for these anomalies are far less sensational but no less interesting. Lunar transient phenomena are widely accepted by planetary scientists as genuine events, but they are attributed to a range of well-understood, if poorly observed, natural processes. The Moon, while geologically dead on a planetary scale, is still dynamically active in smaller ways. The release of subsurface radon gas, for instance, can cause localized hazes. The constant barrage of micrometeorites strikes the lunar surface at tremendous speeds, creating instant, vaporizing impacts that flare as tiny, brief flashes of light. Furthermore, the extreme temperature swings on the Moon from scorching heat in direct sunlight to bitter cold in shadow can cause rocks to fracture and shift, creating sharp reflections and new shadows that weren't there before. As for the strange structures seen in orbital imagery, scientists point to the powerful combination of pareidolia and the Moon's uniquely harsh lighting environment. With no atmosphere to scatter light, shadows are incredibly stark and black, and the low angle of the sun can stretch a simple, jagged boulder into a long, spire-like silhouette. What appears to be a perfect dome in one photograph can be revealed as a small, curved hill when viewed from a different angle or with higher resolution data. The shard, for example, is now generally considered by geologists to be a combination of a small, steep hill and a photographic processing artifact, its dramatic appearance amplified by the high contrast of the original image. Despite these rational explanations, the theory of a far-side alien base remains one of the most resilient in the space conspiracy pantheon. Its power lies in its perfect, elegant secrecy. We can never point a telescope from Earth to disprove it. Any anomalies spotted by our orbiters can be explained away by believers as either a deliberate smokescreen or simply another piece of the hidden infrastructure. It transforms our closest celestial companion from a barren rock into a locked door, and the enduring human question is, what lies behind it? The far side of the Moon will always be a canvas for our greatest hopes and deepest fears about the cosmos, a silent reminder that sometimes the most profound mysteries are not in the distant nebulas, but in the perpetual darkness right next door. Yet our fascination with signals from the cosmos isn't confined to the modern digital era. To find one of the most captivating early chapters in this story, we must travel back to the turn of the 20th century, to the isolated laboratory of one of history's most brilliant and misunderstood inventors. At number 23, we have the Tesla-Mars connection, a theory that posits the great Nikola Tesla didn't just pioneer alternating current and wireless power. He also became the first human to intercept deliberate communications from an alien civilization, specifically from the planet Mars. This idea transforms Tesla from a mere inventor into a pivotal, tragic figure in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. A man whose greatest discovery was allegedly suppressed and ridiculed by the scientific establishment of his day. The story begins in Colorado Springs in 1899, where Tesla had built a massive experimental station to study high-voltage, high-frequency electricity. It was here, while monitoring the colossal electrical storms his equipment generated, that he began noticing something unusual on his sensitive radio receivers. He described hearing a series of rhythmic, mathematical sounds, a sequence of clicks that he was convinced were too orderly and structured to be of natural, terrestrial origin. In his own writings, he speculated that these could be a form of intelligent communication, and he famously stated his belief that they were coming from the planet Mars. For a man of Tesla's towering intellect and visionary nature, this wasn't a wild fantasy. He was actively working on a system for interplanetary communication, believing that radio waves could bridge the vast distances between worlds. To him, the idea that another technologically advanced society might be attempting the same thing was a logical and thrilling possibility. He even claimed to have sent a return signal, a powerful burst of energy directed into space, though he could never confirm a reply. The cultural context of the time made this claim especially potent. The late 19th century was the peak of public speculation about Mars, fueled by Percival Lowell's widely publicized maps of the so-called canals, which he argued were evidence of a great, dying civilization engineering a planet-wide irrigation system. When a genius like Tesla announced he was picking up signals from that very world, it seemed to many like scientific confirmation of Lowell's romantic visions. The story was splashed across newspapers, captivating the public and cementing the connection between Tesla and Martian communication in the popular imagination. The modern conspiracy theory that has grown from this event, however, goes much further. Proponents argue that Tesla didn't just hear random cosmic noise. He successfully decoded a message, and the content of that message was so revolutionary that powerful interest, including his rival Thomas Edison and the financial backers of the emerging fossil fuel industry, moved to discredit him and bury the discovery. The proposed rationale for this suppression is twofold. First, the technology implied by such communication, if reverse engineered, could have led to free wireless energy for all, dismantling the profit models of the nascent energy cartels. Second, the mere knowledge that we are not alone was considered too dangerous for the public, potentially upending religious, social, and political structures overnight. Tesla's subsequent struggles, his descent into relative obscurity, and the mysterious circumstances surrounding his later years and death are often cited as evidence of this deliberate suppression. His laboratory in Colorado Springs was mysteriously destroyed, and many of his papers were seized by the U.S. government after his death, fueling speculation that they contained the blueprint for his interplanetary communicator or schematics for other suppressed inventions like his rumored death ray and limitless energy devices. This narrative neatly ties the Tesla Mars signals into the broader tapestry of conspiracy lore, connecting it to themes of a breakaway civilization, free energy suppression, and a long-standing government cover-up of extraterrestrial contact. The scientific and skeptical perspective offers a far more grounded, yet still fascinating, explanation for what Tesla heard. Modern astronomers and electrical engineers point to a range of known natural phenomena that could account for the signals. The most likely candidate is a type of non-terrestrial natural radio emission. In Tesla's day, the field of radio astronomy didn't exist, and the cosmos was far noisier and more mysterious than we now know. We have since discovered that planets, stars, and even galaxies emit a symphony of radio waves. Jupiter, for instance, produces powerful decametric radio bursts that sound like ocean waves crashing on a shore. The sun itself generates intense radio noise during solar flares. It's highly probable that Tesla's incredibly sensitive, but fundamentally primitive, receiver was picking up one of these natural celestial sources for the first time in human history. Another strong possibility involves plasma physics. Tesla's massive coils were creating artificial ball lightning and massive electrical arcs, ionizing the atmosphere around his lab. This ionized plasma can itself generate and modulate radio waves in strange, pulsing patterns. He could have been hearing the echo of his own experiments, a feedback loop between his transmitter and the charged atmosphere, creating sounds that his brilliant, pattern-seeking brain interpreted as a coded message. There's also the simple, human element of auditory pareidolia, the same tendency that lets us see faces in clouds. In the hiss and crackle of early radio static, it's easy for the mind to latch onto any brief moment of semi-regularity and impose meaning upon it. The debate over what Tesla actually heard may never be settled, but its legacy is undeniable. He was likely the first person to experimentally detect natural radio emissions from space, a profound scientific achievement in its own right, even if it wasn't a message from Martians. His story represents a pivotal moment where our technological reach first extended to the point of being able to listen to the cosmos, and the human imagination immediately leaped to the most extraordinary possibility. The Tesla-Mars connection theory endures because it perfectly encapsulates the romance and tragedy of a lone genius, battling against a closed-minded world, convinced he had touched the infinite. It transforms a historical anecdote into a foundational myth for the idea that contact has already happened, that the evidence has been in plain sight for over a century, and that the greatest secrets aren't always found in the future, but are sometimes hidden in the forgotten crackles of our own past. Now, we turn from the cosmic to the terrestrial, but to a continent so alien and remote, it might as well be another world. At number 24, we plunge into the icy depths of a theory that claims our planet itself holds a secret gateway, hidden beneath the perpetual ice of Antarctica. This is the idea of an Antarctic space portal, a hidden entrance to a hollow Earth or a vast, subterranean alien base. A legend woven from threads of historical expeditions, military mysteries, and the digital ghosts of modern satellite imagery. This theory paints the southernmost continent not as a barren wilderness, but as a forbidden, guarded library of lost worlds and advanced technologies. The foundation of this chilling narrative is built upon a historical pillar, the strange saga of Nazi Germany's interest in Antarctica. In the years leading up to World War II, the Third Reich did indeed dispatch an expedition to the frozen continent, a mission dubbed the Schwabenland Expedition in 1938. Their goal was to claim a vast swath of territory, which they named New Schwabenland, and to investigate rumors of ice-free regions and thermal vents that could support a secret base. For conspiracy theorists, this was no mere land grab. They suggest the Nazis were acting on esoteric knowledge, perhaps gleaned from ancient Tibetan texts or occult societies, that pointed to Antarctica as the location of the lost city of Atlantis or the entrance to the mythical Hollow Earth, a realm they believed was populated by a super-advanced race, sometimes called the Aryan. The legend holds that the Nazis succeeded in establishing a clandestine base there, known as Base 221 or New Berlin, where they continued to develop advanced aircraft, their so-called Foo Fighters, and other wonder weapons in secret, even after the war was lost. This story then collides dramatically with a very real and massive American military operation. In 1947, the U.S. Navy launched Operation High Jump, led by the legendary polar explorer Admiral Richard E. Byrd. Officially, it was a training mission to establish a research base and test military equipment in frigid conditions. But the scale was immense, involving 13 ships, multiple aircraft, and over 4,000 men. The operation was abruptly terminated after only a few weeks, far ahead of its scheduled 6-month duration. Upon his return, Admiral Byrd gave an interview to a Chilean newspaper where he made a startling comment, stating that in the case of a new war, America would be attacked by fighter planes that can fly from one pole to the other with incredible speed. For believers, this was not a reference to Soviet jets. They interpret Byrd's words as a cryptic admission that he had encountered something unbelievable, an advanced enemy force based in Antarctica itself. The official report cited early onset of winter and mechanical failures, but the conspiracy theory posits a far more dramatic conclusion, that Bayed's fleet was met and decisively repelled by a fleet of advanced aerial vehicles, piloted either by the remnant Nazis from their hidden redoubt or by the inhabitants of the inner Earth themselves. This narrative of a hidden world beneath the ice is powerfully fueled by modern tools, specifically the public availability of satellite imagery on platforms like Google Earth. Amateur sleuths spend countless hours scanning the white expanse, and they claim to have found startling anomalies. They point to what appear to be perfectly rectangular entrances carved into mountainsides, formations that look like massive, buried structures casting geometric shadows, and strange, saucer-like shapes partially revealed in the melting ice. One of the most famous of these is the so-called bloop, a mysterious ultra-low-frequency underwater sound detected by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in 1997, which some initially speculated could be a colossal, unknown creature. While scientists later confirmed the sound was consistent with an icequake, a large iceberg cracking and fracturing for proponents of the portal theory, it remains evidence of vast, hidden caverns and titanic forces at work beneath the ice shelf. The proposed purpose of this Antarctic gateway varies wildly, but it consistently revolves around themes of forbidden knowledge and cosmic connection. One version suggests it is a literal stargate, a stable wormhole or portal that allows for instantaneous travel to other points in our galaxy, used by extraterrestrials as a hidden terminal for their operations on Earth. Another, even more mind-bending idea is that it is the primary entrance to a hollow Earth, a concept with a long history in fringe science, which posits that our planet is not a solid sphere but a shell, containing an inner world lit by a central sun and home to its own ecosystems and civilizations. In this telling, the strange lights and UFOs often reported in the Antarctic skies are not coming from space, but are emerging from this inner realm. The scientific and logistical rebuttals to this theory are, as one might expect, substantial. Geologists and glaciologists explain that the perfect rectangles and structures seen in satellite images are almost always a result of a phenomenon known as pareidolia, combined with the way satellite imagery is stitched together from multiple high-contrast photographs. What looks like a door is typically a shadow cast by a steep cliff face or a crevasse. The intense pressure and movement of the Antarctic ice sheet, which can be miles thick, would make maintaining any permanent, large-scale entrance to a subterranean world a constant, losing battle against unimaginable geological forces. The idea of a hollow Earth is definitively disproven by our understanding of planetary formation, seismology, and gravity. We have mapped the interior of the planet through the study of seismic waves from earthquakes, which reveal a solid inner core, a liquid outer core, and a mantle, all under immense pressure and heat that would make any habitable cavity impossible. Admiral Bayed's own extensive, publicly available diaries and official reports make no mention of encountering flying saucers or secret Nazi bases. They detail the very real and perilous challenges of Antarctic exploration in the 1940s. The enduring power of the Antarctic portal theory lies in its potent combination of a genuinely hostile and unexplored frontier with a rich tapestry of historical mystery. Antarctica is the last great wilderness on Earth, a place of extreme conditions where governments do maintain a presence shrouded in a degree of operational secrecy, largely for scientific and geopolitical reasons. This reality provides just enough fertile ground for the seeds of imagination to grow into forests of speculation. It transforms a continent of science into a realm of gothic horror and science fiction, a forbidden zone where the maps truly do end, and where anything from lost civilizations to interstellar gateways could be waiting, locked in the ice, daring us to look closer and question what we've been told about the very ground beneath our feet. And now we arrive at the final, and perhaps most philosophically staggering, theory on our list, one that doesn't just question what NASA has found, but the very nature of reality they are exploring. At number 25, we confront the simulation hypothesis, the mind-bending proposal that our entire universe, from the farthest galaxy to the space agency's most celebrated missions, is not base reality, but an incredibly sophisticated simulation, akin to a cosmic video game. In this framework, NASA isn't merely a window to the stars. It is a key character within the simulation, its discoveries and anomalies potentially serving as clues left by the programmers, or simply as unavoidable glitches in the code. This idea, once confined to science fiction and philosophical thought experiments, has gained remarkable traction in the 21st century, championed by prominent figures in technology and physics who argue that if a civilization could reach a sufficient level of technological maturity, creating such simulations would be not just possible, but probable. The leap into conspiracy occurs when this high-concept philosophy is fused with the more traditional mysteries of space exploration. Proponents of this view scrutinize NASA data stream not for signs of alien cover-ups, but for digital artifacts, evidence that the rules of our reality are not fundamental laws, but parameters that can sometimes be bent, broken, or show their seams. They point to a host of peculiar incidents from the history of spaceflight that, in their view, defy conventional explanation and are more logically understood as software errors. One of the most cited examples involves the famous Apollo 10 mission, which we discussed earlier for its strange, outer spacey music. While scientists explain it as radio interference, simulation theorists propose an alternative. It was an audio glitch, a bleed-through from another part of the simulation's code, or a corrupted sound file loaded into the wrong environment. Similarly, the curious case of the WOW signal, that powerful one-off radio burst from deep space, is reinterpreted not as an alien message, but as a temporary rendering error, a cosmic pop in where a signal was generated for a single frame before the simulation's engine corrected itself. The anomalies don't stop with sound. Visual data is also mined for potential evidence. Certain photographs from the Hubble Space Telescope have shown objects that appear to move at impossible speeds between frames, or distant galaxies that seem to repeat in perfect, tessellating patterns. While astronomers attribute these to lens flare, cosmic ray hits, or data processing artifacts, simulation believers ask a provocative question. What if these are not flaws in the telescope, but flaws in the reality the telescope is observing? They are the visual equivalent of a texture not loading correctly or a non-player character clipping through a wall in a video game. Even the fundamental constants of physics are not immune to this scrutiny. The exact, finely tuned values that allow for a universe capable of supporting life have long been a subject of wonder. From a simulation perspective, these aren't miraculous coincidences. They are the initial startup conditions chosen by the programmers. The very fact that we can discover mathematical laws that govern the cosmos is seen not as a triumph of human reason, but as a feature of a logically constructed and internally consistent simulation. So, what role does NASA play in this grand narrative? In the simulation hypothesis, the space agency becomes a crucial tool for the simulation's inhabitants to explore their own coded environment. Its missions are not just journeys of discovery, but acts of debugging, uncovering the limits and rules of the program. When a rover on Mars analyzes a rock, it is, in effect, reading the properties of an in-game asset. When an astronaut floats in the microgravity of the International Space Station, they are experiencing a physics engine calculation in real time. The conspiracy angle deepens when one considers the possibility that those in charge of the simulation might not want its inhabitants to realize their true nature. From this viewpoint, NASA could be an unwitting actor, or perhaps a carefully managed one. Its findings filtered and its most perplexing data explained away as instrumental error to maintain the illusion of a solid, independent reality. The discovery of a definitive glitch could be as destabilizing to the simulated society as the revelation of the Matrix was to its characters, potentially leading to a system-wide crash or reset. The scientific and philosophical rebuttals to taking this idea literally are, of course, profound. The primary counter-argument is known as the burden of proof. The simulation hypothesis is what philosophers call an unfalsifiable claim. There is no conceivable experiment that could definitively prove we are not in a simulation, because any result could be explained as part of the program. This places it firmly outside the realm of conventional science, which relies on testable and disprovable hypotheses. Critics argue that invoking a simulation to explain cosmic oddities is an unnecessary complication, a violation of Occam's razor, when simpler, natural explanations grounded in known physics and technology are available. A lens flare is just a lens flare, and radio interference is just radio interference. Furthermore, the computational power required to simulate every particle and force in a universe of this scale is so incomprehensibly vast that it borders on the paradoxical, leading some to question whether such a project is even logically coherent. Yet, the power of the simulation hypothesis lies not in its provability, but in its profound philosophical implications. It serves as the ultimate grand unified conspiracy theory, a meta-narrative that can encompass all the others. The face on Mars, the lunar anomalies, the secret space program, within the simulation framework, these could all be interpreted as Easter eggs deliberately placed by the programmers, corrupted data files, or narrative threads within a much larger story. It elevates our gaze from questioning what NASA is hiding on the moon to questioning the very code of the moon itself. This theory forces us to confront the nature of consciousness, reality, and our place within it. It transforms the cosmos from a physical place into an informational structure, and our exploration of it into a journey of self-discovery within that structure. Whether a literal truth or a powerful metaphor, the simulation hypothesis represents the final frontier of cosmic speculation, a point where science, philosophy, and conspiracy converge to ask the most fundamental question of all. If the universe is a simulation, then who or what is pressing play? And so our journey through the cosmos of conspiracy comes to a close, a whirlwind tour of 25 ideas that stretch from the moon's dusty plains to the very fabric of reality itself. We've navigated a landscape where official narratives are questioned, where shadows on Mars become ancient faces, and where brief radio signals spark dreams of interstellar conversation. This wild ride reveals something fundamental about us, not just as stargazers, but as storytellers. We are a species hardwired for pattern recognition, and when confronted with the vast, silent emptiness of space, that instinct doesn't shut off, it goes into overdrive. These theories thrive in the gap between the known and the unknown, between the data we have and the answers we crave. They are not merely fantasies. but narratives that fulfill a deep human need for a cosmos that is not cold and indifferent, but alive with mystery, purpose, and perhaps even hidden players. They allow us to feel that our journey through the stars is not a lonely one, but part of a grander, more dramatic, and far more interesting story. This entire exploration sits on a razor's edge, the delicate balance between healthy skepticism and unwavering belief. A skeptical mind questions, probes, and demands evidence, and this is the very engine of scientific progress. Yet, when that skepticism curdles into a default rejection of all authority, it can create a vacuum where any alternative narrative, no matter how outlandish, feels more true than the complex, often messy reality. Conversely, belief provides meaning and wonder, but when it becomes dogmatic, it can close the mind to new evidence, trapping us in an echo chamber of our own making. The most fascinating space isn't in the absolute conviction of either side, but in the dynamic tension between them. It's in that space where we ask, what if? Without losing sight of what is. These conspiracy theories, in their own peculiar way, keep science and history honest. They force institutions to be more transparent. They push for clearer explanations. And they remind us that every great discovery began as a challenge to the accepted truth. They are the restless, imaginative counterpoint to the slow, methodical march of peer-reviewed science. And our culture is richer for having both. The stories we've explored are more than just tall tales. They are cultural artifacts, reflecting our deepest anxieties about government power, our timeless curiosity about our own origins, and our collective hope that we are not alone in this breathtakingly vast universe. They show that the final frontier is not just a physical place to be mapped and measured, but a psychological and philosophical landscape to be explored. Now, the conversation turns to you. We've traveled from the lunar landing debates to the simulation hypothesis, but this is just the beginning. Which of these 25 theories captured your imagination the most? Did the tragic legend of the lost cosmonauts send a chill down your spine? Does the sleek, mysterious shape of Oumuamua still have you wondering if we glimpsed a passing ship? Or does the sheer, audacious scale of a secret space program fire up your sense of adventure? The comment section is your launchpad. Share your favorite theory, debate the evidence, and tell us what mystery you'd want us to investigate next. This is a community built on curiosity, and your perspective is a vital part of it. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the unknown, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Our channel is dedicated to exploring the farthest reaches of science, history, and mystery, and we have so many more incredible journeys planned. From lost civilizations and paranormal enigmas to the latest breakthroughs in astrophysics, we're here to feed your curiosity and challenge what you think you know. Thank you for joining us on this incredible expedition through the shadows of space. Keep looking up, keep questioning, and never stop wondering about the incredible secrets the universe might be keeping.